Just a note not to be confused by the fact that I refer to Kenneth Ives, who plays grumpy Dominator Toba, in the present tense during the early episodes of this omnibus, Happy Times and Places. He was alive when I started this process, and he passed away during it. So R.I.P. Kenneth, who's fantastic in this story and was an excellent character actor and went on to be a fine television director. R.I.P. Kenneth. I hope it's a command accepted from me, Toby Haydock, to you, the listener of Happy Times and Places, to enjoy this podcast in which I watch a Doctor Who story, dropped facts and observations, and see if I can guess what my special guest's favourite things about each episode might be.
So, I'm Andrew Smith. I'm a writer, and in relation to Doctor Who, I wrote Full Circle, a TV series for Tom Baker in his last year as the Doctor, and for the last 10 years plus I've contributed several stories to the Big Finish audio ranges for Doctor Who and other titles. And so Toby, for my contribution to this excellent series of yours, I selected the Dominators. I'm well aware it's not the most loved of Doctor Who stories. And I don't know if I'd defend it as a great story. I don't think I would. But I love it, and I love it because I remember watching it as a 6-year-old. It's one of my earliest Doctor Who memories. And I even remember having a dream, or even a nightmare at the time, because I was 6 years old, in which there was like a cliff edge and a line of quarks were coming over the cliff edge, appearing there. And it's burnt into my memory. And I had no idea years and years ago that the story still existed. So when it was released on VHS, I remember being very excited. And then watching the video and then seeing that thing I remembered from my dream or nightmare was actually something that I picked up from the TV show, because it actually appears in the show with the quarks appearing over the cliff edge. So this sets off a real chemical reaction in my brain. So I'm sat here now in my front room, and I am now about to watch episode 1. And I shall, at the end of episode 1, I shall pick out my favourite thing, as I'm required to do. And I'll see how that goes. Happily, I'm not watching this just to contribute to your podcast, Toby, but also as research for a story in a range that I'm script editing for Big Finish at the minute. So it's a win-win, really. But anyway, let's have a look at episode 1 of The Dominators. And I don't know about anyone else, but I, for one, am really looking forward to this, and I hope you enjoy it, mate. Cheers.
Well, everybody, how exciting is this? Welcome to Happy Times and Places. And I'm very happy that our special guest this time around is Andrew Smith, writer of Full Circle, a bona fide Doctor Who writer. He's canon! And the canon fodder that he has selected for this podcast is, as he says, nobody's favourite story, and certainly not one of mine, I have to say, The Dominators. And I'm a big Patrick Troughton fan. So let's see what we can come up with for this tale. But how exciting to have Andrew as part of it. I mean, I remember watching Full Circle as a kid. Season 18 is one of my earliest memories. I remember bits of 16, mostly repeats, I think. A lot of 17, but then, I mean, I remember all of 18. I remember where I was when a lot of those episodes were on. So I even had to go to somebody else's house to watch episode 2 of Full Circle, because I had missed it for a school thing or a party or something. But it was the early days of videotape, and somebody we knew had a video, and they videoed it for me. So after school one day, I went to theirs to watch the episode that I'd missed. How exciting, those sorts of days. The idea of having a 60s episode on videotape was out of this world at this point. And now here I have it on a thing that we couldn't have even conceived, where the videotape is been reduced to tiny little pixels, or the pictures on the videotape have been reduced to tiny little pixels and stored in a box, a Brit box. I do have this on DVD, but for convenience sake, because I get better sound, I get sound out of the speakers attached to the internet that I don't if I play a disc. Anyway, you don't need to know that. So I'm going to watch it on a lovely big screen, which I've never done. And I am going to press play on The Dominators. Patrick Troughton's 5-part story, The Dominators, is going to begin in 3, 2. Have I pressed play? Have I pressed record? Yes, I have. I wasn't sure if I'd done that or not. In 3, 2, 1. And it's taking a while to load. Alexa, volume 6. You can tell that this is live. It's not live by the time. Alexa, volume 6. So this was the earliest for me. Alexa, volume 5. I'm so sorry. This is the earliest for me. Patrick Troughton solely full story. For when I was a time tot, I mean, there were, in fact, more episodes of this existed than I think existed of the whole of season 5 or the whole of Patrick Troughton's contribution to season 4. We had episode 3 of The Underwater Menace, 1 of The Faceless Ones. Oh, and the 2 of The Moon Base. That was it. And another one came back of The Faceless Ones. Now, these... This spaceship thing, I seem to recall there's lots of different fades between the pictures. There's no attempt to sort of marry it up and go, this is one continuous shot. And I remember they do that with the TARDIS, don't they? With Fury from the Deep, we see it spinning, then it fades to the next picture. And it's like, well, we can't do that, so we just do this. I'm not sure that's tolerable to today's eyes. I think we need a bit more of an attempt to either disguise that or to do one continuous shot. But it's interesting that it happens a couple of times in quick succession. Now, here is, in my recall, the best thing about the Dominators, straight off the bat, and it's Ronald Allen as a rather sort of cadaverous creature that he is. I think he's got a great sort of undead alien thing going on about him, and a suppressed cruelty, and it's a sort of gruesome and alien performance. And no disrespect to Kenneth Ives, who does a very good job too, but I think there's a slight added alienness to what Ronald Allen does, and I think he's super duper. And I remember when Ronald Allen died, because he'd been in Crossroads. There was a sort of suggestion, there was a sort of damned with faint praise of Kando. I remember Mum saying, yeah, they were kind of saying he wasn't that great an actor, and I think, because he was famous for Crossroads, there was a certain sort of the coverage was slightly patronising, and he'd sent himself up a little bit in the comic strip Presents, where he played Uncle Quentin in the famous 5 spoofs. And of course, if you send yourself up, that then gives people license to do it as well. That was a very interesting segue from the sort of smoky mountain model. I actually thought because BritBox occasionally slows down and I thought, oh, is this slowed down? No, it's again a funny kind of segue from that to then a new model shot to now we're on film here with this wonderful cast here of we have Cully, played by Arthur Cox, often criticised this casting for casting a middle-aged man as a young rebellious youth, and Arthur Cox is not a middle-aged man in this. It's just the olden days where he's slightly balding and portly, but that's young people could be that. And his two of his three mates are played by actors, seeing as these are short-lived characters, actors with a great future. Warhead is played by Philip Voss, who's already been in Doctor Who and Marco Polo as Akamat, but went on to be a leading player at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Played Shylock at the Royal Shakespeare Company, but did some great theatre work, as well as some telly as well. But he's a marvellous classical actor, Philip Voss, who only died last year, as I record this, of COVID, sadly. He'd retired pretty much. I interviewed him a couple of times. He was a delightful man. He was very theatrical and good luck with the project, he said to me, I recall. And I remember we did a thing. He was in an episode of Out of the Unknown, playing a very small part, but he came in and did the commentary for us for the BFI, which nobody got paid for. And he said, and people had to introduce themselves and go, my name's Jim Magoo. I played the leading role of Stingidibidi. And Philip Voss went, my name is Philip Voss, and I played a policeman. And it's very sort of Nicholas Craig, the actor. I loved it. I really liked Philip Voss. And again, the fact that he was a man of such illustrious theatrical pedigree, but he was happy to come in and chat about a sort of one scene part in a thing. And he let me interview him for Who's Round over the phone. Delightful. Really liked him. And what a great career. And I think he's excellent in this. In fact, I remember when I was running through corridors with Rob Shearman, because Rob goes first, and in that we have to say what we like about the episode. And Rob wrote his entire essay about Philip Voss because he's so good. He's although he's got this very pronounced RP, it's a very naturalistic performance, and it's got lots of little, just the way he's sort of leaning slightly and playing with his pencil. It's just slightly more modern than a lot of the acting, certainly in sort of smaller parts that you get in Doctor Who around this time. And the man in the dress is Malcolm Terrace, another actor I was surprised to learn had been in Doctor Who, because he was in television a lot when I was younger, and he was sort of ruddy-faced, pudgy-cheeked. He's a slightly sort of piggy actor. And he's, of course, the co-pilot, weakling scum in The Horns of Nimon. But he was in all sorts of things when I was younger. So I was shocked when I saw his name on the cast list in the Doctor Who episode guide in Doctor Who magazine, playing Etnin. There he is, Malcolm Terrace. He also, I think, only died last year. Yes, I think both of these chaps died last year. And Nicolette Pendrell, who's the third one, died some time ago, but her dad, Anthony Pendrell, is in Quatermass in the Pit. So there's the facts on the three short-lived. But they're quite nicely drawn. And Warhead, Etnin, and Talata, I take no credit for this, but they are the numbers 1, 2, and 3 in Arabic, I think. Johnny Morris found that out for a thing. Kenneth Ives is a actor who became a TV director, but he's Hawkeye in Hawkeye the Pathfinder, so he's got good pedigree. Then became a TV director and was married to Marty Kane, who was a great entertainer in this country. This is great. There's a fantastic special effect here to kill poor old a photograph, at least, of Talata, and the other two have vanished from by her side when she falls over and dies. Don't quite know how that works, but and we haven't seen the Quarks, of course. They are a mysterious presence for now, and all that we know is that they melt ladies' faces. That's a really good effect of sort of oil and water. And we have the first of the arguments between the Dominators about whether one should waste power or not, which becomes something of a recurring theme. It's a very protracted early bit of the TARDIS landing sound. So here we have the TARDIS crew. So they've just been watching Doctor Who. Lucky them. They've just been watching episode 7 of Evil of the Daleks. Lucky things. That's a great. That as part, you actually have as part of the canon, the fact that they all sit down and watch Doctor Who. Lucky them. They did something that we can't do. So Zoe's actually only been in it for 5 episodes, hasn't she? So yeah, here we get to one of the things that the whole idea behind this story is that this is a planet of peaceful people, and the writers Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln. Henry Lincoln, as I record this, has died literally this week. A writer I would have loved to have interviewed, but he was not over the moon about Doctor Who and the BBC. And in fact, when we tried to get him for the Web of Fear DVD, it basically stalled when he said, I won't have anything to do with the BBC. Not actually just because this story is obviously that's an excellent shot. Maurice Barry is very good on film and in quarries of getting certainly sort of at distance and composition. And I like the way he uses the Dominator's feet, because that's obviously a slightly forced perspective kind of shot, isn't it? And Kenneth Ives does a good job of sort of stomping about blowing things up. He has the suggestion is that he's quite a sadist, and that is a drawback. That's an excellent explosion of a spaceship. Look at that. There's quite a lot of fuel flying about there. Yeah, that's a really great explosion, actually. Like that. Isn't that a great Fraser Hines with a beach ball? and so yeah, Henry Lincoln did not want to talk about Doctor Who, although he did do an interview for Doctor Who magazine. I've only just discovered, thanks to Gordon Rutter, who did the interview, that actually he was interviewing about something else and said, while you're here, can I occasionally mention Doctor Who, and sort of cobbled together 3,000 words or whatever. And he's sending us the files, old Gordon, so that's very generous of him. So we at least have Henry Lincoln on record talking about Doctor Who, but we couldn't get him for any of the official releases. But it wasn't necessarily because of this, although this story was a bone of contention between Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln, which is why it is credited to Norman Ashby, which is, I believe, their father-in-law's Christian names stuck together. Because they weren't happy with Derek Sherwin and their relationship with the production team. Now, but I have to say, excuse my oven for beeping. I'm hoping it will stop. It's got some samosas in. Yes, they're very grim. Those statues. And I think, are they... I've got a feeling they might be... Shut up, oven! I've got a feeling they are actually people. They're extras. They're not dummies. They're actually supporting artists made up to look like dummies. And I've got a feeling there was a hope to maybe use them as living statues on Dulcis as well, that never happened. But they actually, rather than have dummies, they have made up actresses playing the sort of nuclear scarred dummies in the museum. And I think this is all great, by the way, this whole thing of having a sort of nuclear wasteland. And then you've got the mystery, of course, of, well, we're in a nuclear wasteland, but hang on. So we've got this, the initial threat is, oh God, they've been wandering around a nuclear wasteland, they're all going to be soaked in radiation and they're going to die. But actually, no, because the Dominators have landed and they've hoovered up all of the radiation. So that's a great in for the story, I think. And I remember thinking, and every time I see them, I think, why have they got 3 characters? Warhead, Etnin and Talata. That's quite a lot to sort of sacrifice in your initial salvo. You have to pay for 3 actors, and it's not like any of them are particularly distinctive characters. Why you could have just had Cully's best mate or something like that be melted. But it's of course because when they meet Cully later, he says, oh, I came with 3 friends, and they think, it's the TARDIS crew are his 3 friends. So that's actually very carefully placed, the number of Cully's mates mirroring the number of the TARDIS crew, in order that this survey team, Balan and Kando and Teal, underestimate the threat or what is going on, or don't take seriously the Doctor and Jamie and Zoe because they associate them with Cully, and Cully is a rapscallion. So I think that's all sort of carefully placed, which I like, because yes, that's quite funny, because Jamie does it. We always like it when Jamie puts his foot in. He goes, "Oh, we come in a TARDIS." Oh, but not say that. But the Doctor interrupts him and gives him that wah wah moment, and then explains it anyway. This is Johnson Bailey, who, when I did this is an early story that I did a DVD commentary for. I had the great pleasure of doing it. It was one of the first ones I did. I think maybe the third. And I was very happy to be part of it. And nobody really knew anything about Johnson Bailey at that point. I've since discovered in my research for the Quatermass book, actually, that he's the son of Katie Johnson, who is Mrs. Wilberforce in The Lady Killers, and also the little old lady in the in episodes of the Quatermass Experiment. So that's his claim to fame, is that he had a famous mum. And this is quite sweet. She's very sweet, isn't she? And yes, so they're being taught they're being taught the dangers of nuclear war, which of course are, very big at the time. They're unfortunately getting pretty big now as well, which teaches us about complacency. So this whole thing about, atomic war, and a lot of sort of, progressive drama was, tackle this issue. None is, for Doctor Who being the liberal program. And I remember being furious when Doctor Who magazine did a special where different writers wrote about their takes on each story, and there was a Patrick Troughton special, and there was Gareth Roberts, who's, it's fair to say, somewhat more right wing than I am, wrote a sort of tract about how lefty liberals are foolish, and this story is a great satire of sort of liberal attitudes. And I was young then. I remember being furious with it. How dare Doctor Who magazine be a mouthpiece for right wing ideas and blah blah blah. As I got older, I have sympathy with that idea, and I don't think that Doctor Who should be there just to confirm my liberal political bias. And I think there is something to be said. I would always still advocate the peaceful way where possible, but I think one has to acknowledge that being wholly peaceful can, you're a bit stuffed if the other people hold no truck with that. And so whereas I thought when I was younger that this was beyond the pale, and a couple of reactionary writers, why how dare you use Doctor Who to have a go at pacifism, I now think it's a perfectly legitimate thing to be doing, even if my sympathies are still slightly mimsy and liberal. But there was obviously the peace movement was in the air, and a couple of writers go, yeah, okay, but what happens if two big-shouldered sadists come in with their squeaky robots? Then what are you gonna do? It's. I actually quite like the design here. Ian Marter does brilliantly in the book, doesn't he? Because he makes them sort of creaky, cadaverous, oily creatures. I think who's and sort of tortoise-like, and I mean they are a little bit tortoise-like. I've never understood the museums in Doctor Who that have fully operable weapons, and you don't go to the Museum of Science and Technology in Manchester and be able to take off in a Spitfire, or I'm sure in various weapons museums there's not a loaded musket or anything, but I mean, yes. As I say, my memory of this is that there's a lot of argument between these two, but there's a deathly sort of stillness about Ronald Allen there, with a slight grimace to the mouth. So unlike the sort of sadist Tober, he takes no pleasure in what he does. There's a sort of grim fatalism about an alienness to Ronald Allen that I think is really good, is really interesting. And, you know, the Dulcians here being, you know, credulous is unlogical is quite nice. I mean, I think as the story goes on, you want to shake them a little bit, but it's an attempt to create, an alien society with an attitude. Obviously, where it all falls down is that they spend the whole thing going, but we're from Dulcis, we're very people. The Pilpil of Dulcis, well, we've gathered the people of the planet Earth don't all have the same views or the same approach, let alone of one particular part of it. You know, we're led to believe this is what the whole planet are like. You know, this is an island. Dulcis isn't a city; it's the planet. I mean, you'd be laughed out of the room if you said the people of Wigan are very good at making wind chimes, but have no truck with queuing. You know, or whatever it is that you'd want to say. Arthur Cox was a nice man who played Cully. I used to occasionally see him on the Piccadilly line, having done the commentary with him, latterly with a moustache. And he's one of the few, the illustrious bevy. I have to be careful, because I think I said in a commentary for the Crotons, I said to Gilbert Winner, you're one of the few actors that's done Doctor Who on Torchwood, a classic Doctor Who in Torchwood. And somebody went, well, actually, there are a few actors, you know, here's a list of actors. And I was like, yeah, I still think there's comparatively few. I think I don't have to be picked up on the word few. You know what I mean? It's just an artful way of drawing attention. It's just better than going, and you are an actor that did Torchwood and Doctor Who. Anyway, he's one of a number of actors to have done classic Doctor Who, Arthur Cox, and new Doctor Who. Now, that's bigger than the actors that have done classic Doctor Who and Torchwood. But Arthur is in a story I've already done for Happy Times and Places, The 11th Hour, as Mr. Henderson. So delightful that, and I think it was pretty much his last part. The last time I saw him on the Piccadilly line, I'd occasionally see him and not speak to him because I didn't pluck up the courage. Then I started to pluck up the courage because I knew I'd have been disappointed if I hadn't. And I said, you know, good to see you in Doctor Who again. And he said, oh yes. He said, yeah. And he said, I've pretty much retired now. But I think I was gigging, and I used to finish at Leicester Square about 10:30, and Wednesday night was the night he'd go to the theatre. So we'd often end up in the same carriage on the same line. But he sadly died. He also died last year. Yeah, it's not been a good couple of years for the people of Dulcis. And again, this is nice that there's that the ship has landed near the TARDIS, because the Doctor and Jamie go check out. That's not Patrick Troughton, of course. Patrick Troughton is not on location for this story, so any shot of the Doctor is not him, which is a great use of resources. But and it is quite fun trying to then spot Chris Jeffries, who definitely should be interviewed at some point if anyone can find him. I wish some of these obscure people of Doctor Who history were called things like Thunderclap McGinty rather than Chris Jeffries, because they would be easier to find. I love the report. I love the way he does this. Stop it, Jamie, and pushes him away and started. And that's a fantastic shot of the Quarks atop a big hill, and then Kenneth Ives' tallness. I think the head design of the Quark is absolutely fantastic. The boxes are quite cute, but I remember seeing pictures of the Quarks, and and thinking they looked absolutely magnificent. I don't think they're quite as good in execution, because they totter about a bit, and the voices we will talk about, which I think are generally a good idea, but again don't quite work in execution. Sheila Grant, who's a fantastic radio actress. So that was episode 1 of the Dominators, which I actually think is a really, really good episode. It's setting up. I think the idea that there's this radioactive island, which also has a museum that is a sort of totem plus research project for the effects of radiation and atomic weapons, which gives the story its theme, which is of a race that is scared of nuclear annihilation and so have gone down a peaceful path, and a race who are fueled on nuclear propulsion, but also quite happy to dominate, to walk into any situation and use superior force, and that therefore a peaceful attitude is no match for that. So that, I think that's an interesting dynamic to fly in. But the fact that then the nuclear aspect of it has some practical plot thrust as well, I think is good. And as I say, I think the placing of the 3 characters that get wiped out, and that being 3 characters to mirror the TARDIS crew, and then the fact that the box, the TARDIS, is the site is sited where it is, that brings it into the story, which means that the Doctor and Jamie see the Quark prints, and that's also where one of the bits of mining equipment later on goes on. So I think it's all very cleverly placed. There's no other story like it either, really, because a lot of the Troughton futuristic ones a lot of Troughton stories full stop are set on bases, and they're usually bases on Earth, if a slightly futuristic-y Earth. So there aren't many on alien planets, and those that are, the Macroterra, it's a human colony, and also it's got the sort of Orwellian cheerfulness thing going on. But there's no real sort of is the alien planets where there's an alien civilization and alien invaders too. It's a sort of rare mix in that regard. I suppose we have the Gons and the Crotons coming up, but it still feels it is slightly anomalous in the feel to the rest of the Troughton era. So for that, I suppose it should be treasured, even though I think more to my taste is a base with a stroppy commander and that feeling of isolation and being besieged and all of that I do love those stories so much. But that, I thought, had enough in it to be interesting. Maurice Barry is very good on film. I think he films location very well. And the decision not to show the Quarks until the end of the episode was interesting. And that's not unusual. I enjoy it when Michael Ferguson does it with the Ice Warriors in the Seeds of Death. So there's no reason not to enjoy it when Maurice Barry does it here. Ronald Allen is great. And I think I've got to pick Ronald Allen at some point. Do I pick him now? Because if I pick him before Andrew does, I get him whenever Andrew picks him. Whereas if Andrew picks him and I haven't picked him, I then can't pick him. But I do think he's... Partially because I think some of the other characters are played by great actors, but they're not the best parts. But I think he brings something special and alien and sort of slightly cruel, but his enjoyment of the cruelty isn't too stark and grotesque. As I say, it has a sort of contained menace and sort of grimacing quality about it. I think, Ronald Allen's the alien quality that he gives to Dominator Rago, I think is even though actually, as we'll discover, there are shortcomings to the characterization, but that's not the actor's fault. I didn't think I was going to choose that for episode 1. I do like the whole there's radiation, but there's the radiation gone. It's been sucked up by the Dominator spaceship. I think that's a really clever piece of plotting. And Andrew is a writer. So I might choose the whole radioactivity thing because that gives us our setting. It gives us the museum. It brings all the characters into it for various reasons. The survey team there who then can info dump on us. I think that's all quite smartly done. So yeah, actually, I'm going to do the radioactivity and what it brings to the plot and the storytelling, and the fact, of course, it's hugely resonant for the time. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, quite resonant for our times as well. But we continue, we carry on. So, radioactivity and all it brings to the episode. And what does Andrew Smith, writer of Full Circle, think is the best thing about episode 1?
Okay, so that was episode 1 of The Dominators. It's time to pick my favourite thing, and my favourite thing in that was the appearance of the Quarks right at the end there. A real nostalgia rush, a nostalgia gasm, if you will, when they appear. So etched into my memory, such a part of Doctor Who, such a part of my childhood, really. To finally see the Quarks on screen, the little bubbly voice, the pointy head, those arms extending. And they were such a part of Doctor Who for me because not only were they in the serial, but they were also ubiquitous in the comics at the time, in TV comic strips. So I saw plenty of them beyond this story, but it's marvelous, and I can well remember watching it when it came out on VHS and seeing them after so many years again for the first time on screen, and it comes right back to me every time I see them. I'm taken right back to being 6 years old. So yeah, my favourite thing from episode 1 is the appearance of the Quarks.
I suppose I should have anticipated that. And it is a great end to the episode. I love the way that you have the two of them on that mound, that hill. It's a hill. It's like a mountain. It's massive, and it's a really smart piece of direction to then have the taller Dominator come and stand in the middle. It's a beautiful piece of composition, and actually just the colouring of the jet black sort of arms and legs of Toba also gives him a contrast as well. So it's the whole incongruity that is sort of striking and interesting. And I do like the design of the Quarks. But I'm sure we'll talk about them a lot. And Maurice Barry shoots so beautifully on film for Tomb of the Cybermen. It's no surprise to see that he does all sorts of great things with the shapes and sizes of the landscape. Okay, so I didn't get a point for that, but I did enjoy episode 1 of The Dominators because I don't think I've ever watched it in sort of pieces. Oh, I suppose I did when I did Running Through Corridors, but I remember not having a great time watching it with Running Through Corridors when I did it with Rob. I think it was when Rob and I started to struggle with the Troughton era a bit, but because I haven't watched any Troughton for ages, I actually found that an intriguing premise. It's a good idea. It's actually got something to say and wants to talk about something, even though, it is that the writers do come across as sort of slightly fulminating men in tweed at a dinner party going, "And these young people with their peace." But as I say, as I get older, part of me goes, and I've got, young sons who are as idealistic as I was when I was younger, and I found myself in that position that I thought I would never be in, of going, well, yes, your idealism's all very well and good, but half a mo. It still doesn't mean I'm not a weedy and probably not very sensible liberal, and would always sometimes fly in the face of a more pragmatic argument. But I don't know, because I think of some magical part of humanity that must win out. I'm less rejecting of the idea that you can use Doctor Who to explore this idea. Now, I don't think we'll see how they explore it. As I say, maybe that was a bias of mine coming into it every time I watched it, of going, well, I don't really like the politics of this story either. I actually think it set up a very interesting conundrum. And not facetiously, it's got the radioactivity and all of that going on. So I thought that was an interesting and pretty well mounted episode. There are some production flaws, as I say. Some of the segues between, or the mixing between model shots was. I don't think had too much thought put into it, or had a sort of sense of that'll do. I don't know. So how do I feel? How do we feel about the fact that spaceship's sort of all glowing, and then when it's landing, it's not, and it's grayscale rather than sort of translucenty whitey. But maybe that's it entering the atmosphere, and that's what that is. In which case I kind of like it. I don't know. I just think the fact that it sort of fades from one to the other, and there's no attempt to sort of match it up. Well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how you feel about that. But anyway, we'll throw that in there as. And then there is that really odd move between the sort of slightly out of focus misty mountains onto the landing of Cully and Co.'s craft. Oh, but then there's that wonderful special effect where Talata gets terped. Anyway, yes, plenty in there, plenty to talk about. Certainly not. I think I've just always found it quite a boring story. But when I'm having to concentrate on the minutiae and on an episode by episode basis, I'm very happy at the moment with the Dominators. So I hope you are too. But I think. Shall I destroy episode 1? No. Let's. I'm glad that it remains in the archive for us still to enjoy. So until next time, thanks very much for watching, and hey, peace. Well, hello everybody. It's time for episode 2 of nobody's favourite Patrick Troughton story, The Dominators, which, as you heard there, is not even our special guest, Andrew Smith, writer of Full Circle and a great many fine Big Finish adventures too. Andrew is a lovely, lovely chap, and he's canon, proper Doctor Who writer. I'm lucky enough now to count as a friend, because he got in touch with me many moons ago on Twitter and said, "Oh, I'm going to come and see your show," and so we met up after the show, and how delightful that was. Well, I think we spoke a bit on Twitter first, and then he said, "Oh, I'm going to come and see your show," and we've been chums ever since. And he's a really interesting guy, policeman for many, many years, and then when he retired, he went back to writing for Doctor Who for Big Finish. So he's chosen a story that he remembers because he's a bit older than me. So this for him is nostalgia, whereas for me, it was one of the few full Patrick Troughton stories available, and it was one I yearned to see actually as a youngster, because I'd loved the pictures of the Quarks, and I remember being quite relieved and go, well, we haven't got many Patrick Troughtons, but I was quite excited that the Dominators was one of the ones that we did have. But I've never really loved it over the years, but I really enjoyed episode 1 there. So let's see what happens when we go to the planet of peace, Dulcis, in episode... Well, we've spent episode 1 on the planet of peace, Dulcis, but we're going to now go, you and I, as a podcast broadcaster and a listener, we're going to transport ourselves to Doctor Who in 1968 and the planet of Dulcis, episode 2 of the Dominators, and I'm going to start playing it in 3, 2, 1. Whoopity-doo, whoopity-doo. I remember being jealous because they'd showed this, I remember, at Longleat. I didn't go to Longleat, but my friend Ollie, who was my friend who got all the stuff that I wanted, I remember, I'll probably mention this later, but I remember I tracked down Zuckuss, who was a Star Wars figure that we couldn't find in the shops anywhere. I remember finding it, and it was a shop that didn't have many figures. We tried all the big ones, finding it in a shop that just had a handful. And I got Zuckuss, and I thought, yeah, but I bet if I get this, he'll get an AT-AT, which is the impossible to get giant, big prize toy. And I rang him, and honestly, I said, you'll never believe it, I've got Zuckuss. And he went, oh, well, I was in the shop with my gran, and I just went, please, please, please. And eventually she relented and got it me. Whereas if I kept saying please to somebody to get something, I'd have had a clip round the ear. Anyway, he wasn't even as big a fan as me, and he went to Longleat. But he very kindly gave me his programme. And he didn't watch any of the stories anyway. He just sort of, I think he walked around and saw some of the panels, but there was a tent, wasn't there? Where the idea that actually watching episodes was as exciting as seeing a panel with some of the stars. So Barry Newbury's back as designer. That's a special effects shot, isn't it? Where Jamie is flung back against the wall, whereas Troughton has to sort of act it and go out of shot. Going your bodies to the wall. He's got a sort of slightly dead, slightly ethereal sort of delivery. That's really nice, actually. That nice, clever piece of camera work to suggest that to have Jamie within the wall that he was pinioned to, sort of then turned horizontal. So let's look at the Quarks. I think the Quarks, played by school children, John Hicks, Gary Smith, and Freddie Wilson. We make a mistake in the because you never know what somebody's going to say in the commentary. I remember Fraser Hines going, "Oh yeah, one of them was in Crossroads." So I gave him the names, and he went, "Oh yeah, Freddie Wilson, he was in Crossroads." No, Freddie Foot was in Crossroads, and Freddie Foot was the servo robot in The Wheel in Space. So you think, well, that's easy. Fraser's just made a mistake. Another young actor, only a few weeks before saying a diminutive robot. However, I tracked Freddie Foot down and then spoke to him on the phone, and he claims he was a Quark as well as the servo robot. And I've got the production file. There is no evidence of that, unless maybe on one of the recordings on the last, at the last minute, one of the others was ill and he came in and did that. I don't know. But that's not. I'm still not letting Fraser was just getting the two confused. Anyway, Ronald Allen is super, and he's in Doctor Who a year or so later as Ralph Cornish, and look at the way his upper lip is sort of slightly curling in sort of thinly veiled disgust. But it's a contained performance, and I love that shot. Look at the way he sort of leans in like a malevolent tortoise who's, going through a terrible divorce. So I think one of the reasons we're not over the moon about the Dominators as a community, and obviously there's bound to be somebody listening who goes, well, actually it's my favourite story, but I'm generalising, and I know it's this may be news to some of the younger listeners, but sometimes a general sentence, its specifics aren't tailed entirely to you, and it's not of great offence if they're not. But I think one of the issues here is I do think that, and Romans wore togas, sure, but I think I think the curtain ball gowns that some of the Dulcians wear are not great, and I actually think that high skirt that Felicity Gibson's got going right, that's not a great costume either. And Zoe gets one later, doesn't she? Yeah, I'm not wild about the Dulcian costume policy, I have to say, and I don't know why, because it's an attempt to do something spacey without being sort of silver and shiny. So, I sort of approve of that. And having something based on an ancient culture, has, is a sensible policy, because you go, well, it's, this is something that has been done, therefore it's conceivable. I just think it's aesthetically, it looks to us now a bit sort of cod sci-fi. I like Jamie's leather jerkin, though, with fur-lined leather jerkin, and he's wearing it's got a woggle, isn't it? It's like a Cub Scout. It's a sort of cravat, but it's got a woggle. So it's is it called a woggle? The thing that Cub Scouts had, that like the little ring that holds it together. You don't see that. I'm sure they're called a woggle, and that might have just been something that what my mother called it. She used to run the Cubs and the Scouts. I was never part of it, though. Weirdly, I think they were far too practical and muddy for me. Troughton is great, isn't he? He's so good, and I already have an inkling that might be my favourite thing of the episode coming up, which is the Doctor pretending. Oh, that's quite abstract. The suggestion, the sort of receding circle suggesting flight. Now here we go in the council chamber. I got slightly muddled. There were supposed to be female statues here, played by actresses. One of them was going to be Valerie Stanton, who turns up later as Madeline Sigri's secretary in the Space Pirates. She died a couple of years ago. And they didn't use the female statues in the end, who were going to be played by actresses who were nonetheless booked. But they were people in the nuclear museum last time, but they weren't female. They were men covered in bits and bobs. So right principle, wrong gender of supporting artiste being a dummy rather than a statue. But anyway, because I suddenly thought, oh, hang on, I did worry that I'd got a slight muddle, so I did just double check that. So that is all right and correct. It's funny seeing Zoe in her Wheel in Space costume, because of course, yeah, she's still relatively new, but she's right into the action. I love Wendy Padbury; she's great. I do like. I have to say, I rather like the two unnamed council members who just spend the whole thing being idiots, but they do it rather well. Ronald Mansell and John Cross, and then because there's four of them. I'm not counting Bovim, the bald guy played by Alan Gerard, who's just been interrupted by the arrival of. Now, who would you think, dear listener, is the main guest star of the Dominators? Could it be Crossroads actor Ronald Allen playing the chief Dominator, or could it be his testy sidekick, who's a very interesting character and the main sort of villainous one, because he does all the killing, Kenneth Ives as Toba? Or could it be Cully here, the rebellious youth who's on the side of the good guys and the hope for the future of Dulcis as it emerges from pacifism into bloody murder? No, it's none of them. It's this guy. It's Walter Fitzgerald, who's only in episodes 2 to 4, and it's not a great part, but in the billings, it's starring Patrick Troughton with Walter Fitzgerald, Ronald Allen, Kenneth Ives, and Arthur Cox, and Fraser Hines, Wendy Padbury, because that's how it would go. So, if the credits weren't done in order of appearance, as they are at the end of the episode, but in order of importance, Walter Fitzgerald would be next billed after Troughton. And here he is, a fine film actor in his day, a little bit, I would say, past it. Can one say that? No, it's not a great part. And I mean, if you think of 72-year-olds that you know now, I think he's early 70s in this. But people lived through a lot worse than we do, so aged a bit differently. Although, as I say, that said, Arthur Cox is not as middle-aged as our initial look at him might suggest. It's a nice set. It's a bit. This reminds me a bit of sort of episodes of Out of the Unknown. I don't know if it's just because of Philip Voss and my association with doing the commentaries and things for that series on the now deleted DVD box set that we worked very hard on. But the sort of slightly painted backdrop remind me of the kind of Isaac Asimov-y futuristic sets of some of those productions. And Barry Newbury had, of course, done loads of design work for the show early in the series, and hasn't returned to Who much from those early seasons, and now here he is. I quite like the different panels on the Quarks ship. I like the fact that it's sort of based on the TARDIS principle, isn't it? That they've got a central dais that you can sort of move round, which makes for some interesting movement. Now this is Troughton at. I actually like the Quarks. I was worried about them being a little bit wobbly, but I actually think they're rather a good design. Troughton, being this sort of panicking child that he is, this slightly pesky urchin, and of course he's deliberately making a hash of this, and pretending that it's because he's a bit stupid and a bit panicked. But he wears the panic so well and so convincingly, even though it's arch and childish. He embodies that sort of slightly overgrown child thing, that it works within the characterization. And of course, what he's doing is he's doing the brilliant thing that Doctor Who does at Doctor Who's best, is making the enemy underestimate you. Yeah, and I mean, I think it is a slight issue with the story that they don't, these ruthless guys don't just kill these two characters, but the Doctor and Jamie convince them that they're stupid, and Rago wants to conserve power, so we don't kill them. A nice little spark effect there, which I think is on film. And I love that Jamie joins in, and that's got to be Troughton and Hines there. He grabs the Doctor and so starts electrocuting him. So they know that they're putting themselves through pain in order to convince the Dominators that they're stupid. And it's very easy to convince them that they're stupid, because and I think they're a joy. I think Troughton and Hines are gold dust. There's a real rapport between them, and I sort of like it when that. I mean, it's counterintuitive really, because I like it when actors are completely consumed in the character and you completely believe it. But I also quite like it when you can see an element of the actors off screen, on screen. There's no reason why you can't like both of those things, in the same way that I like character acting, but also I like stars who are the same in everything. So as long as it's good, and I love the way they put their hands right up in the air. Troughton and Hines are beautiful, but the Dominators do let them now, I think, for the rest of the story, wonder about causing trouble, and you sort of and the script is aware that is a problem, so it goes, well, no, we'll tie it in with the fact that we don't want to run out of power, and it would take power to destroy them, and that would be a needless waste, and it sort of illustrates that the Dominators, are callously disdainful of that they see as being inferior, which ends up being a shortcoming of theirs. But I think it's too stark a shortcoming. Why not just throttle them? You know, why not punch them to death? Oh, he says robots, like Terrence Dicks. He's been talking to Terrence Dicks. Robots. He's so good, Ronald Allen. I'm assuming that's a wig he's got on, or maybe it's not. But it's dark hair. But he is like a sort of malevolent tortoise. But he's got a very Gollum-like countenance. Well, he hasn't. The makeup on him is very good. They've sunken his eyes and they've sort of chiselled his features, and he is like a sort of stone edifice of cruelty. But it's not a sadistic cruelty, and I do quite like that contrast between Ronald Allen's low-key, studied, disdainful cruelty in a way, and Kenneth Ives' more sadistic, which of course Rago sees as a shortcoming, enjoying it too much. And this is nice that track. Well, one, I like the hole in the wall. That's nicely done. Troughton, brilliant that we don't like them much. They tell us what to do. I think he's creating this whole hierarchical system on Dulcus between clever ones and stupid ones, which is all completely made up. But again, he embodies it so well. And of course the. Shall I destroy them? So the irony of this, of course, is because Toba is an idiot, Toba spends most of the story being Burke, and an insubordinate one, and Rago, because of the way that he's played and because of his status within it, he is the more cool-headed one. We're led to kind of think, well, he's right. You don't want a subordinate who is wayward, who doesn't obey commands, and who doles out death arbitrarily just because he enjoys it. And yet, if Rago had listened to Toba and Toba had been allowed to kill everybody he wanted, their plan would have succeeded. So it's slightly contrary to what we expect, and indeed the way that the whole thing is played out. It's only when you sort of stop and think about it, you go, but actually no, Toba, who's the foolish one, is right. And it's Cully being Senex's son is handy because it gets them access to the council and all that sort of thing. But that outside, seeing outside the window the sort of city, which is just a painted flat, isn't it? But that's quite effectively done. Oh, but so there's a clothing dispenser. I love that where you go, this is what happens in space. You get your clothes. You just dial up your clothes, and of course everybody wears the same clothes. So, it's basically a leotard with some netting, isn't it? That poor old Felicity. You have to walk around in your underwear a lot in futuristic 60s Who, didn't you? And I think, yes, they have a bash with these characters, and I remember there was a rumour when I was a youngster that some of the Dulcians were painted gold. I remember Doctor Who magazine citing an interview with Giles Block, who plays Teal. And that, I remember that planted a seed of going, oh, you can people interview sort of supporting actors. Oh, I like the idea of that, because they're gonna tell some stories I've probably never heard, because of course I've pored over the interviews with the regulars. They're very jolly, aren't they, Zoe and Cully together? They're having a Saturday tea time adventure for kids. Now, and of course we have no, don't destroy them, it's a waste of energy. So yes, here's Giles Block, who is one of that few, and don't quibble with the word few, numbers of people who is somebody whose sibling has also been in Doctor Who, because Giles Block's brother Timothy Block is Tanner the taxi driver, the chauffeur in Black Orchid. So the Block brothers have both done a Doctor Who. Giles Block is a director at the Globe Theatre. He was Master of the Verse at the Globe Theatre. A great man of Shakespeare, and he's a very nice fellow. I've interviewed him for Who's Round, as well as having him on. He participated in the commentary for the Dominators that we did. So yeah, the Dominators are the masters of the 10 galaxies, but you can just wander into their spaceship. Now, these voices. Sheila Grant is a fabulous voice actress. Her voices crop up a lot in... ow, that looked really painful. In the Radio 4 extra plays that I present from the archive. She's long dead, sadly. But her name always stuck out to me because there was a character called Sheila Grant in Brookside, played by the excellent Sue Johnston. So I always noticed her name. That's really well done, the way that they do that. The table sort of flattening out just with a bit of trickery, and I do like. He looks so good with his analysing headgear on, and he's really not a fun guy, is he, Rago? He's a very sort of clinical, cold and clinical scientist. And that makes sense, going, well, we'll keep them alive because we might need a labour force. That's an absolutely good use of resources if you're marauding creatures on a warpath. You have to if you're using the planets that you invade as kind of waste stations, you sort of top up your resources from there. I like these shots on film; they look good. I wish, and I think the Dominators and the Quarks look good together. I think it's a pleasing visual. They are, and they're not quite as sort of plonky and wibbly wobbly as I thought. So their voices, the Quarks' voices, all of their noises are treatments of Sheila Grant's voice, aren't they? And I think that's a really, really nice idea. And I think having these creatures that melt your face to bits and blow you up and whatever, having these high-pitched voices is nicely incongruous. The Dalek voices are brilliant and they're scary and harsh and menacing. But I think I think it's an admirable idea to go, well, let's have the voices quite disarming. It's the "Who are you, my mummy" sort of ideology, isn't it? Of have something with an innocent voice. That makes the fact that it's then a parody of innocence and a thing of destruction. That works. That's a really good idea. And unfortunately, I think, that's excellent. That's excellent model work. And I really like that sequence with the Quarks on the top of the hill. Oh, I think there's a few episode endings, aren't there, where the buildings falls in on Cully and somebody else. Oh yes. And Fade to Black. Yeah, that's all right. It's very hard to do a building falling to bits on a Doctor Who budget, and especially then sort of have it as the last piece of action. So we do have that bit where the actors sort of have to clasp onto each other and fade to black as quickly as possible, please, so that nobody's hanging around. But I love the bit outside with the Dominators there, with the Quarks on the hill, and shows how powerful they are, that from a distance they can sort of total a building. Very nice. So we'll talk more about the Quarks' voices, where, yes, I do like the principle. I'm less convinced about the practice, but we will talk about that, I'm sure, during... now you see, BritBox has skipped to the next episode and it's playing it really slowly, but that's okay. It's like watching it on an old VHS switch going... because that used to happen all the time. As each episode stopped and finished, you never had a clean opening. If you were watching on a bootleg, it always sort of started by going... And do you know what? So part of me... So maybe that's what BritBox is trying to do. It's trying to recreate the old bootleg experience. What we should have is have the Super Channel logo in the corner of the Tom Baker stories. So apologies, everybody. I think my laptop ran out of memory halfway through recording. So I've just done a bit of jiggery-pokery just so at least the end of this episode is of the kind of quality I like to do this stuff in. So I have to choose my favourite thing for episode 2, which is... it's going to be Patrick Troughton pretending to be stupid. I love that. I think it speaks to how the Doctor, uses wit and intelligence, by flagging a lack of intelligence that's ersatz, that's a front. In order to, it's guile, which is great because it's fun, but it's also manipulative. It's sneaky, but also it allows Troughton to play up being incompetent, which he does so well. He's a sort of Butterfingers, but he's a Butterfingers kind of guy. Troughton is the most Butterfingers of all the Doctor, and also that sort of that hapless schoolboy thing that he does that is so winning, and again sort of disarms the opposition really, because it's believable too. In lesser hands, it would be unbelievable. So what is good old Andrew Smith going to choose for his thing number 2? I am choosing Troughton being stupid.
Okay, and now I'll pick my favourite thing from episode 2. It's a close run thing because I was quite taken by the way the Dominators immobilised their prisoners, sticking them to the wall, which had then become a table. It's a nice little flourish, that. But I've gone instead for the scene where Ronald Allen as Rago examines Jamie with his visor on. Quite spooky, menacing, creepy, and again just a nice little flourish. And I don't know if I've noticed it before, because if I did, I've forgotten, but he points out that Jamie has only one heart, and then when he has the Dulcian under examination later, he mentioned that Dulcian has 2 hearts, which suggests that the Dominators themselves have 2 hearts, so it's not a bodily feature that's unique to Time Lords by any means. But yeah, so Rago examining Jamie on the table with his spooky futuristic visor is my favourite thing from episode 2.
Well, I do like Rago's spooky futuristic visor, as Andrew describes it. And yes, the 2 hearts of the Dulcians now is the subtext there saying they've got too much heart, and actually you need to be cold and pragmatic in the face of subjugation, or if it's just a bit of nice sort of alien colouring. But yes, of course, and the Time Lords are the most famous 2-hearted people in Doctor Who. And I'm sure somebody somewhere might write a story to show that the Dulcians are some faction of Time Lord sleeper agents, or Time Lords who've abandoned the ways of Time Lordery for the ways of namby-pamby pacifism. And whether they're painted gold or not, who knows? I think that ended up just being a load of nonsense. Although you can see from Giles Block's colouring that there is... that it's not an impossible suggestion that there might be some sort of golden aspect to them, if only their hair. But anyway, and then the rumours that certain Patrick Troughtons were. I remember, God, there was a time when Fury from the Deep existed and episode 4 was in colour. I mean, God, we fell for so much. It's a good job we don't do that nowadays. Fall for any missing episode rumour going, no matter how extraordinary the claims. So look, I'm sorry about the sound dipping there. I'm glad we got it back. I was going to do more Dominators tonight, but I fear I need to tidy up my computer, back things up, and do that, and convince myself I've actually done something. Well, it is sort of useful. I'm surprised Andrew didn't choose Patrick Troughton's charade. But let's see. So Andrew is 2-1 up on me. I'm getting nowhere near him. I think it's interesting because he watched it as a kid. I wonder if there are things that, images that are sort of seared into his brain that are, are comforting / scary to watch. They have a resonance that they don't have with me because I got this on a murky VHS on the butt end of my video collecting. But anyway, I'm enjoying the Dominators. I think it's got a bit more to recommend it than I've hitherto thought. Obviously, I've programmed myself to be positive, so that's part of it. I'm looking to enjoy it. But actually, that's not a bad thing to do with life, as it throws all sorts of disastrous things at you to try and see the good is what this podcast is all about. And as a result, I'm enjoying the Dominators. I hope you are too. And let's reconvene here when I have a slightly more functional computer. Until then, goodbye. Welcome back, everybody. Toby Haydock here, watching The Dominators, one of the only 3 5-part serials in Doctor Who history, and one of 2 that wasn't originally intended to be 5 parts. But maybe we'll get into that at some point later in proceedings. I, as you heard, have been set to the task of watching this story by Andrew Smith, writer of a great Doctor Who story, Full Circle. Before this podcast, I would not have considered the Dominators to be great, apart from for a story with mining being a great bore. However, I've quite enjoyed parts 1 and 2. So let's see what we make. I mean, that's with the caveat that I'm deliberately trying to be positive. Were I to be holding it up against other Troughtons, I think it might struggle. But nonetheless, I am trying to accentuate the positive, and I have managed so to do in my head. So I've been enjoying this. So there's nothing wrong with that. So let's see what happens on the planet Dulkis. Even a kiss from one of the Dulcians would be dull. They're those kind of people. Let us watch episode 3, starting in 3, 2, 1. So I will ask Alexa, Volume 5. Sorry, I always forget to do something. There's quite a lot to set up when you do these things. I film it from a couple of angles. I have to set up the microphone. Alexa, Volume 4. And I always forget to do something. Anyway, here we are. At least it shows that, just in case you weren't sure, this is very much a one-man band, which is why I would send you in haste to my Patreon page to enable me to maybe do these things better. Anyway, look, everyone's prone to forget things, as the production team of The Dominators were, because whoever's job it was to stick up the episode 3 caption, which presumably might have been in that filmed reprise, forgets to do. So is this the only classic series Doctor Who without an episode caption? Maybe. I love Maurice Barry's thing of going, let's just get the Dominators to stand on the hill with a quark. And Ronald Allen there with one foot slightly askew and higher than the other looks great. And Maurice Barry does like his crash zooms, which are rather funky. That was quite a nice, as the Dominators came together and the camera was moving too. He really is a different beast. I don't think he's the most imaginative studio director, but he keeps it funky with the camera. I don't, maybe that he had gifted film cameramen who he allowed to do whatever they wanted. But certainly the shooting of the Tomb of the Cybermen film stuff is gorgeous. Zoe's had to hoik up her dress strap there. That had fallen askew. Never noticed that before. I don't normally look for such things, let's be honest. I think the Quarks look rather good, actually. They slightly plod a bit when their feet are going up and down. But no, other than that, good. I like this performance here, but I remember sort of reading the cast list and going, I don't know who Bovim is, I don't know what he does, and he's the other counsellor, but it's Alan Gerard is nicely sort of pompous. And I remember, did I say this last episode? Sorry, it's been a couple of days since I saw the last episode, so forgive me if I repeat myself, but the Dominators repeats itself quite a lot. I won't threaten to destroy you and then get interrupted by my superior 100 times. So, but Alan Gerard is very good, or very different, at least, in an episode of The Avengers that I saw him in, playing a tattooist. Kenneth Ives is... he's Hawkeye in... the BBC Last of the Mohicans, where he headlines above two of the world's best actors, Philip Maddock and John Abineri. But he's good as Hawkeye. Often those heroes are the least... I mean, he's no Daniel Day-Lewis. It's a very BBC early 70s Hawkeye. But I'd forgotten... Well, it hadn't quite... I'd always considered the Dominators to be just sort of large-shouldered fellows, but the sort of tortoise things really sticking out to me on this particular watch. And I don't think that's a ludicrous idea. With limited resources, we're often... come on, how many episodes of Star Trek have I seen, or Star Trek spin-offs where it's a humanoid with a lumpy face, and that was with much bigger resources at their disposal. So, an attempt to change the body shape, and the actors seem to be sort of, looming and poking their heads out. It's Walter Fitzgerald was a fine and highly regarded actor, but he's totally wasted here. Doctor Who has a bit of that going on during this period. I mean, Esmond Knight was a hugely respected actor and plays Domi Sigri in the Space Pirates. Nobody even bothered to take a photograph of him. Troughton's great, isn't he? And yeah, did I? What now? I've got to remember what I nominated last time. Oh, it was Troughton playing the fool. And in episode 1, it doesn't matter, I don't. I think it was something to do with the nuclear power, wasn't it? Because I've got Ronald Allen's excellent performance in reserve. Oh, I do like Arthur Cox. He was also the driver, regulars that popped in and out of Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, as the driver. I saw him play Sir Andrew Aguecheek at the Ludlow Festival, directed by Arturo Vila from the War Games, and his... no, he wasn't Andrew Aguecheek, he was Sir Toby Belch, and Andrew Aguecheek, his partner in crime, was Giuliano from The Mask of Mandragora. I was so lucky being brought up in Ludlow, because you'd have this visiting theatre company, and there was usually somebody from Doctor Who, or quite a few people from Doctor Who. Who else was in that? Doesn't matter, you don't care. I think Maria was, because she was married to Michael Napier Brown, Arturo Villa, was Vilma Hollingbury, who's the lady whose leg grows back in The Doctor Dances. Anyway, it's actually it's batting back and forth from the various scenes with a certain amount of pace, and what is he playing Subbuteo? What on earth is Walter Fitzgerald doing with that thing on the table? It's almost like just got bored there and went, there's a bit of the set here. I'll play with this Weeble. It's a Weeble that wobbles and it won't fall down. What on earth was that? Maybe I wasn't paying attention, and he said, I shall consult the Space Weeble, or the Weeble of Peace. Oh, you've got me there, says the Doctor. It's so lovely. Now, did I mention last week that the two non-speaking council members have a Quatermass connection? One is Aubrey Danvers Walker, who pops up in all sorts of other stuff as well. And the Danvers Walkers were quite a family. There's a Michael Danvers Walker, who's an actor, who's an Out of the Unknown, and was an extra in the Quatermass Experiment. He's, I think, one of the last survivors of the Quatermass Experiment. I've corresponded with Michael a couple of times, and Aubrey was, I think, also called Bob Danvers Walker, and was also a playwright, but did tiny parts on telly or, extra work. And actually, Michael Danvers Walker is sometimes just credited as Danvers Walker, and is in an episode of The Prisoner. I love these two, Ronald Mansell and John Cross, as the gossipy old extra, not extra, but unnamed sort of the chorus. They're like the Arak and Etta of the Dulcis Council. Is this sort of gossipy, pedantic pair, pointless bureaucrats. And the other one who you don't see as much as you see of Aubrey Danvers Walker is Malcolm Watson, who is the only person to be in all three of the original Quatermasses. That's quite a spooky shot. They're looking at the. There's always something I think looking at a television screen and a monster comes on. It's sort of. I think there's something to do with the fact that you can't affect it and you can't touch it, and the person that you're trying to communicate with has been usurped by a creature and all the incongruity that goes with that. I like that. That was effective. I think the Quarks are actually rather. I think I've rather taken the Quarks for granted in previous viewings. I think they're nice. A nice design. I think I will talk about the voice, but I'll finish on Malcolm Watson. Bernard, you come, Dad? Oh, Bernard was going to come and join me, and he's gone to sit on another chair. That's a shame. Malcolm Watson is also an extra in the Quatermass Experiment, as is Aubrey Danvers Walker. They were in the same scenes together, actually. But then Malcolm Watson is has a credit as a member of the commission in Quatermass 2, and a credit and some lines as the museum attendant in episode 1 of Quatermass in the Pit. So he's in all three of the 1950s Quatermass serials, but I think this is his only Doctor Who, and he died in the early 70s, 71, 72, I think. Now, the Quarks. Here's a thing. Oh, I think I mentioned this last time. The voices, I think, are a brilliant idea. I think they just need a bit of chatty malevolence. And they don't quite pull it off. The book, I remember, I did mention this last time from Ian Marter, he's very good at sort of, I love the way, this is brilliant, the way that they all walk past and give their opinion. Those two stand there, Zoe and Callie stand there, sort of, doing the, we should do something, or should we? And Balan and everybody sort of walk past with their hexagonal rocks and go, Balan goes, you shouldn't, we should submit, because I'm the old stick in the mud. Kando goes, no, I'm a bit useless and the lady, so I need to back up Balan. And then Teal goes, yes, but I'm a bit of a go-between, and also I'm the young heroic boy, and so therefore I will show a little bit of vim and vigour and a propensity to perhaps break out of the otherwise entrenched pacifism that will destroy us all. So, and I don't know. It's almost like you need something from Balan and Kando to make them both a bit more interesting. I like the bit in episode 1 where Kando is doing her I'm going to tell you the stuff that I've learnt, and Balin is prompting her. I think that's rather nice. But thereafter, the story isn't quite sure what to do with them, apart from them to repeat the mantra that, you know, we're very submissive and it'll all be fine. Troughton's really trying. Troughton's really trying to. Remember Rob saying he feels that Troughton's not great in this, and it's his laziest performance. But I think if you're rewiring Rob Shearman, that is, in Running Through Corridors, if you're rewiring a travel capsule and you end up with your head underneath the camera and your legs sticking in the air, I think you're having a go at trying to make it interesting. I think those head shapes. I think because it means that their heads can turn completely around, and you get the impression that they're looking at you, whichever way they are. And I quite like that, and the sort of round bits within the different sections of the head. I think the Quarks are great, and that they were in a Doctor Who magazine store comic strip. Was it a one-off? Because I didn't have many copies of Doctor Who magazine. I only had the ones that had been sort of bestowed by a friend or were lying around, and I remember it seeming that they were rather special because they'd got their own spin-off. But it's a bit odd to go, our replacement for the Daleks, our brand new aliens, are servants of these other aliens that are essentially tall actors shouting at each other, because unless, you know, they had a plan, I guess, with the Daleks, of going, you know, that main thing about them, that they can't move outside of their own city. Now that they're really popular, we'll forget about that and they can do whatever they blooming well like. Would I wonder the Quarks have returned and it just be like, I thought they could only be servants of the mighty Dominators, and so we went, no, they've outgrown them, or the Dominators are all up in the spaceship up there. Or whether, we would have had to have always had a pair of Dominators to accompany the Quarks as they became the next big thing in the Doctor Who universe, which they were prevented from being because the writers fell out with Derek Sherwin because he felt that this story needed to lose an episode. And I remember in the Doctor Who magazine special where they interviewed every single producer, which I remember being really disappointing to me. It's mad now because it's a brilliant thing to have done, because I wanted pictures from stories and I wanted cast lists and all of that sort of thing. There's a Doctor Who magazine summer special with an interview with every producer. I remember Derek Sherwin saying, we lost an episode of the Dominators. And because I was so fixated on missing episodes, I thought that he meant we lost an episode, i.e. there was an episode missing. And that meant the fact that we had them all now meant that one had been found. It's amazing how you can sort of misinterpret something. But bear in mind, I was very young. But of course what he meant was they lost an episode of the Dominators, i.e. this was supposed to be a 6-parter, and they decided there's not enough going on, so truncated it down to 5, which is a surprise because I have to say I think the Abominable Snowmen and the Web of Fear neither outstay their welcome, and actually the way that both build to a climax. I mean, I think the Abominable... we know that we always think of the Web of Fear as being quite hard-nosed because it's modern and it's military, but actually the way that episode 5, I think, of the Abominable Snowmen builds to a climax is really quite action-packed and gritty and rather fabulous. But, you know... There is with this, it doesn't seem. I don't think you could ever get gritty with these, you know, betogered old guys. Who much as I enjoy the bickering of the two sort of chorus figures, you know, this is not the most dynamic of environments. Even though Brian Cant from Playaway comes in. I'm now obsessed with that Perspex Subutio man on the table. What was Walter Fitzgerald doing with it? But Brian Cant doesn't need it. He's doing I'm holding my wedding ring finger acting, which is always a good trick for an actor if you're not quite sure what to do with your hands. It means you don't have them by the side, but it means you're also not gesticulating with them. Very, very, very sensible piece of let's get rid of these flappy limbs. I need to do something. Oh, yeah, I love the fact that they need to call in a man to go, so we're not quite sure what to do. Well, let's get our specialist in. And he goes, well, and it's almost like these are three official subsections of Dulcian modus operandi. What is it? Fight, flee or surrender or something like that. And it's and the idea that you need somebody to sort of do an inquiry to boil it down to those three choices, I think is rather quaint. And I think Tenser's supposed to be the sort of young, thrusting member of the committee. He's the sort of hot-headed maverick MP who's coming up through the ranks. And I love the fact that it's Brian Cant, who I watched recently on Happy Times and Places, being Kurt Gantry, hard-bitten space hero, security service guy, mortally wounded Dalek fodder in episode 1 of the Daleks Master Plan. But of course, to generations of English viewers, he was a children's TV favourite in a programme called Play Away, and is something of a very welcome piece of the televisual furniture, and one of those people it was quite a surprise when you grew up to realise was an actor. You sort of thought of your people on children's television as children's television guys, but actually he's a perfectly good character actor. And there are some play school presenters who were fine actors who've cropped up in Doctor as well. I think Colin Jevons did play school, didn't he? And Chris Tranchell and all sorts. And Jeremy Irons did Play Away. So we typecast actors at our peril and indeed theirs, because then it makes you go, should I take this job? Because what if somebody watching thinks that's all I can do? And Brian Cant also has a Who claim to fame. Well, not claim to fame, but nice connection is that his son, Richard Cant, is the guy that knocks on the door with the letter for Sally Sparrow from her friend Miss Nightingale, who's been sent back in time, and says, I got this from my grandmother. She gave it to me and told me to come to this house on this day. That's Richard Cant, who's a fine, busy character actor in his own right. I saw him on stage with an old chum of mine, and with Jeff Stretfield and with Matt Bardock and various others in My Night with Reg at the West End a few years ago. That's why it's handy that the museum has a working laser gun in it, even though if I was in charge of health and safety on Dulcis, I would go, I think we maybe decommission this. That's a nice close-up of Arthur Cox. And I like the Quarks head in the sights of the laser gun. That's quite sort of tense. There's always a bit tense when you've got something in the sights because you're expecting somebody to pull the trigger. And Jamie's walked in with his size 10s and ruined it all. And now, is he missed? Yeah, he can't shoot them now. That's a shame, because you're kind of hoping that he's going to laser blast a Quark. And what I like about the Quarks as well is that they've got the two arms that you see sticking out, but then beneath that they've got another two things that look like they could be arms or they could have attachments. And I think anything that looks like it's got, you could stick a claw on the end or do something differently with it, or that has potential to do something that humans can't do. It's like a Swiss Army bot, isn't it? The Quark, potentially with that design, I think is rather winning and rather fun. And I really like the way that they recharge as they do later and equalise their power. This is brilliant. Troughton just acted that superbly, because he ducked before he came back up again, so it made the journey up to the sort of shoulders, not quite making the shoulders of Toba, even more of a comic juxtaposition. I love all these shots of the Quarks in the valleys with with their slaves moving around. We've got to keep an eye on Troughton's location double, because so actually, if that film had been in phase, which it's not, We could have had a little look at his face there, but it was so blurry and it was such a quick movement. They sort of get away with it. But I love all this stuff on film and I think they look good. And Kenneth Ives is putting a lot of energy into it. Sometimes when you play, an alien, you can sort of stride around much more slowly because that's supposed to be sort of slightly more dignified. But he puts a lot of energy into it, and he's good. Kenneth Ives, he's good. I think it's just quite a tricky part because he's just a hothead and a sadist. But he puts loads into it. I like the Quarks zappy with the laser. Good the way that they move there. But I think so. We're going to pretty much have the same cliffhanger as before, but this time it's Jamie and Cully in the museum. Now that's slightly awkward because when we saw the Quark before, a bit's just fallen off him. He was in studio, and then we've cut to location, and I think that's always a little bit awkward. Because it points to the fact that we're not. I think it would have been a bit more helpful to have. Oh, that's good though. That the Quark's head is wobbling even after it's blown up. Yeah, it's a slightly awkward mix between studio and location there, but it means we get the impression that there are more Quarks than there actually are, and it means that we get a Clark. That's what we've been waiting to see all episode. Not that a piece of cardboard falling onto Arthur Cox, but a Quark getting zapped and blown to bits, and that was fun. So the museum is the most unfortunate museum in the history of museums, this. But that's a nice shot, and he's enjoying that. But you can never, because that's studio, you can never do a particularly massively satisfying explosion. That set's looking a bit the worse for wear, really, isn't it? But we're sort of back where we started, except this time it's Jamie and Cully rather than Zoe and Cully. But plenty in there, yeah. I think so. I've just got to remember, because I can't choose what Andrew has already chosen. He chose the Quarks, didn't he, for episode 1, and then something really random for episode 2. For episode 3, Ronald Allen wasn't in that much, was he? I'm tempted to choose my council members, but I do recall they have a really good bit next episode, so I might save them. I'm saving things up for the future, which can be foolhardy. But I think my favourite thing about that episode has got to be exploding Quarks, and there's quite a few, and I seem to recall there's a lot of fun later on when Cully and Jamie just spend the whole thing charging around, dropping rocks and blowing up Quarks, and that's part of the fun of this story. I think is there's only 3 Quark actors, but there are more Quark robots, within the story. It's just they're cleverly filmed, and it's cheated. And I think as a result, one of the positive things we get, because I'm still a child at heart, and if I want to enjoy watching robots getting blown to smithereens, I can. And I love the way that it cut to that blown up Quark and its head was still moving. That was, if you were watching that in the 60s or as a kid, you'd go, whoa, that's just amazing. And because we were sort of promised it a couple of times with I thought very well done, the Quarks in Cully's sights, then Jamie comes in, or is it? So they teased us a couple of times, and then boom, Explodo Quark. So exploding Quarks is my favourite thing about episode 3 of the Dominators. What is going to be Andrew Smith's favourite thing about episode 3 of the Dominators?
Okay, now it's time to pick my favourite thing from episode 3. And again, it's a fairly close run thing. And the one I nearly went for was some of the best fake rock lifting that I think we've seen in the history of the series, right across the cast of Dulcians and Zoe, Wendy Padbury, doing their slave bit for the Dominators. Although I think there was at least one that Cully was carrying that was an actual genuine rock, seeing as they didn't have Foley artists at that time. I don't think for when he dropped the rock and I went clunk on the studio floor. But no, it wasn't that. That wasn't quite my favourite thing. My favourite thing was Brian Cant appearing as Tensa. I'd forgotten he was in it. And he comes in and he's a breath of fresh air, really, this much younger guy amongst these fairly interchangeable Dulcian leaders who are all, pretty much of a muchness. He comes in and he does a really good job in a short scene, but the right amount of gravity and earnestness and, very good. And also there is a personal angle to this, as with the Quarks. Brian Cant, again, takes me back to my childhood. Remember him so well in Play School and Play Away. So Brian Cant as Tensa was my favourite thing in episode 3.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good choice. And what I love about Doctor Who, well, there's many things I love about Doctor Who, but I love the fact that it's a programme that allows us to have somebody like Brian Cant, who, I may be wrong, but I suspect he didn't get as many sort of straight acting roles as he might have liked or deserved, or an actor of his capabilities would, because of being associated with children's programs and stuff like that. But because Doctor Who has this slightly fantastical element, because it's a bit of the televisual furniture where the rules are not quite the same as they are in other programs. And I know other programs, sometimes cast people against type and you get surprising appearances from, a comedian in Casualty or something like that. But I think Doctor Who does allow us to have, performances from comedians playing straight roles and therefore being a bit of a surprise, or somebody that's well known. I mean, really early on, Alan Wheatley, who was well known for playing a villain, the TV villain, the villainous Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, is immediately cast as the peacefulest man of peace of the most peaceful races of all, as Temesis in the Daleks early on in the show. And that's kind of set the show up to go, we will give actors a chance, actors who you will associate with other things, because we need people that you kind of know and like and are comfortable with, because we're going to take you to crazy alien worlds. But we're going to throw down the gauntlet and say, but come on, do something that you're not used to doing. And they'll go, this is brilliant, because I'm normally asked to, dance a jig and say, hello, children, or I'm normally asked to be villainous and I'm being heroic, or, whatever it is, or I'm normally asked to be funny and I'm being a baddie, or, whatever. Or in Bernard Breslau's case, I'm normally used to being seen. But I really do like that about Doctor Who, and I'm aware that's very much me, because I'm an actor spotter and I like actors and all of that sort of thing, and I get great joy. But I do like it when actors are given a chance to do something different, because I know how nice that must have felt, and I think it adds to the great mosaic of what makes Doctor Who wonderful, that you can have Brian Cant, fixture and icon of children's television, play a hard-bitten, mortally wounded space guy, and then the thrusting young buck of Dulcian politics. So good choice. But I didn't choose it. I chose Exploding Quarks, and I love the fact that Doctor Who can have exploding quarks too. But Andrew chose Brian Cant as Tensa, and well, let's see if the story gets tenser as it continues next time. Welcome back, everybody. We're now going to episode 4 of The Dominators, after watching episode... because the last one had no title. For those late to the party, episode 3 of The Dominators, but it does not have an episode 3 caption, which makes it, I think, unique in the history of Doctor Who. Classic Doctor Who, anyway. Now listen, we're going to see what is in store for the Dominators and the peaceful people of Dulkis as this story trundles to its conclusion, we are going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So I, this Derek Sherwin, who I think had fractious working relationships with people. You could see that he sort of rubbed people up the wrong way, and yet I do like the gutsiness of his scripts for the invasion, and that and the general demeanour that he foists upon season 7, even though he departs fairly quickly. It's a very short stint he has as producer, if you think about it. But he does have quite an impact on Doctor Who Sherwin. But I never felt he came across brilliantly in interviews. As I say, I think he rubbed people up the wrong way, certainly. But very, very influential on Doctor Who. And one of his influences was to annoy hang on. We're back in a spaceship all of a sudden. Anyway, we're on an island, Toby. It's very patronising. But a huge impact that Sherwin had on the show. They look fantastic when they're shot in profile, these Dominators. And I do think Ronald Allen is superb. I think it's it takes quite a lot of innate dignity to emerge unblemished whilst dressed as a stroppy tortoise. And I can see Derek Sherwin's point about this, because there are a lot of there's basically 2 cliffhangers to this. One is Toba about to destroy something or in the middle of destroying something, and that is resolved by Rago going, stop doing that, it's a waste of energy, or Cully and somebody in a museum with that museum collapsing upon them, which could be the result of Toba and his stroppy energy wastage. So I can see why Sherwin might have thought this was treading water a little bit. I certainly don't think the plot doesn't feel like it's missing bits or it jumps about too much as a result of the story's truncation. But it does mean we sadly lose Haseman and Lincoln, who I think were 2 very good writers, and I think the 2 Yeti stories are fabulous. We tried to get Kenneth Ives for the DVD and Brian Cant. I think Brian Cant was ill for quite a long time, because I remember. Yeah, I'm sure we tried to get him, and the word came back going, no, and he did do other things after that, but maybe his health was up and down. Whereas Kenneth Ives just is not somebody who wants to give interviews. I think I know he signs stuff and sends it back in the post, but he's never replied to requests for interviews. I think he phoned the boys at Phantom and just said, not really my thing, maybe. So he's not, he's not ignorant or anything like that. It's just some people don't fancy giving interviews. But he's directed some good telly. As I say, he was married to Marty Kane. So he's in the film of Quatermass and the Pit, uncredited. Now, presumably, this isn't too much of a dilemma for the Quark, because Rago is the superior officer. I submit. I mean, yeah, they're 2 good actors, and their characters are fairly sort of broadly drawn, aren't they? But I always think it's to our advantage when baddies squabble with each other, and these 2 don't half squabble. But he's like a kind of sort of terse Frankenstein, isn't he? Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein is the Doctor, not the monster. But he's like a slightly peevish Frankenstein's monster. But but he is like a sort of walking cadaver. He's very good. Wendy Padbury looks great with soot on her face. I don't know. There's something quite urchin-like about a grubby Wendy Padbury. And Andrew mentioned that he didn't think there would have been Foley artists here. There definitely wouldn't have been. I will keep an eye out for this actual rock that he mentioned. Some of these are definitely, but they're decent, but definitely lightweight rocks. Oh yes, of course they've been landed on by. Oh yes, no, they're under the ground. Yes, they found. So that was good because it had been set up, hadn't it? That there's this shelter part underground, and they've fortunately found that in between, the bit of the set falling onto Cully and what looked like the destruction of the building. So that's nice, and that opens up a new opportunity for these characters, and the secret to the ultimate triumph of the good guys. And I always like it when Jamie sort of gets to befriend somebody and spearhead a bit of the action, because Jamie is sort of comic relief because of his because he's a bit dim, but he's always allowed to be very brave and instinctively clever. He's intellectually dim, but he's a bit like Leela in that sense, in that he's only uneducated. Well, no, he is a bit dim as well, but he's also instinctively adaptable and brave. He's a great character, Jamie. I like him a lot. We do like that sort of molecular bonding thing against the wall, but it is film, isn't it? So must have been sort of stuck in very quickly. That's quite deft vision mixing. That. I like his makeup too. It looks like he's got a slightly sort of stony face. Oh yes, he's going to. Oh, is this where he sort of goes? Will it fit me and a quark in it? But I don't think we ever get to see that, do we? Because there are certain situations that you don't want to see your baddies in, lest it sort of dull their luster slightly. And I think imagining Rago piloting the capsule squeezed in with the quark sitting behind him would probably have done nothing for his street cred, shall we say. Beep, beep, beep. What would they have done with the quarks if Lincoln and Haseman had carried on? I mean, you can't imagine them invading 20th century battling a unit, can you? Troughton's good. He's always got that slight edge of panic about him. It is quite TARDIS-like, this set, isn't it, of the Dominator spaceship? And it's a decent size. Barry Newbury. Is it his only Troughton? I think so. But you can tell that this outside is a little limited in its space. But again, I think the rocks and the backdrop are actually pretty well done, considering they have to marry with. Obviously the with the location. Obviously, the Dominators have very good lightweight mining equipment. Oh, that's one of the publicity pictures, isn't it? Balance sort of shrinking from the bright light of the mining equipment, but he moved that with great ease. They obviously their technology involves a certain amount of lightweight equipment. Oh yeah, you do see Rago with the with the travel machine. I wonder what we'd think about this if we only had a handful of telesnaps in the soundtrack. But actually, I think a lot of the things that that help this are visual. I don't think you'd get a lot of Ronald Allen's performance if you couldn't see the sort of snarling impassivity of his face. I do think it's a good idea to make them look slightly corpse-like. They creak, don't they? And you almost get the impression they've got sort of black blood, which I quite like. That's what I'd do if I was making a sort of more modern version of the Dominators. I'd give them black blood. I remember I once had an idea for a fan film. It was a prison planet, of course it was, and it had a couple of Dominators on it because I thought they would be able to be quite easily done and fairly easy to write. And I came up with a new rank because I quite like the fact that he's probationer. What is it, Navigator Rago and probationer Toba. That's a great word because it suggests he's a junior, he's an underling, he's the sort of he's the apprentice Dominator. He's working on his city and guilds in dominating, or perhaps he's just on some sort of work experience placement from Dominator finishing school. And I came up with another rank that was that complied with that sort of word structure. And I remember being very proud of it, and I can't remember what it was now. Functioner, I think. Yeah, which isn't actually that good, but I think I was sort of going sort of functionary, somebody who fulfilled basic tasks, so a sort of junior rank. Functioner. Ober. It wasn't Ober, but it was something. I had a name for them. But I never wrote this story. I just thought about it a lot. Much of my life has been spent just thinking about things rather than doing them. I meant to look up how old Arthur Cox is in this, but I think late 20s, early 30s, but certainly not middle-aged, as often written up as. And I remember him saying, "Oh yes, brilliant! Head over the hill." James, that was definitely Fraser Hines' idea. Why don't I put my hand on the top of his head and pull it back? That's exactly the sort of thing that Fraser Hines would come up with, and one of the many reasons I love him, because it just keeps it this side of daft, but it's fun, and it's embedded in great sort of farcy, silly tradition. But I remember Arthur saying that he was never quite sure how to pronounce quark, and he calls them quarks on location and quarks in the studio, or the other way around. I think because they hadn't quite agreed. So there's certainly a little bit of mandling between quark and quarks. Now, did I tell you about trying to find the quarks? John Hicks, who's one of the quarks, is also the Axon boy in the Claws of Axos. And I was sent... Was it Paul Scoons who sent it to me? I think it might have been. Who's a very nice fan in New Zealand who writes various production notes and is a bit of an expert. And also a very nice chap. I went to New Zealand to do my one-man show. And, he dropped me a line and said, me and my wife will show you around New Zealand. And they did. I love all this stuff of Jamie throwing the rocks. But, of course, that is supposed to... yeah, of course that's supposed to match up with the studio, which is never gonna quite work. But this is good fun, and you've got Balan there as well. Oh, and they shoot. I think all of that's lovely. All of the eat your heart out, Caves of Androzani. This is essentially the same as the Caves of Androzani chase, isn't it? Except it's Fraser Hines and the Quark. Oh, and a giant big rock. Bunged over the side of a cliff. I absolutely adore that. I think it's quite cartoony, but it's not stupid. It's fun. It's action packed. I love it. It's nicely shot. It's a lovely, great big rock. Oh, the rock is now split in two, has it? Or it's suddenly two rocks? It's had a baby rock, and you can see the sort of feet still moving. Love that. Love all that. Bit of wanton destruction. A bit of containable, fun, tea time violence. Only one person is strong enough to do that. I love that. Troughton's absolute delight in the carnage. And of course, their relief that Jamie is still alive. I love that, and that speaks to the quality of this sort of ensemble and the team feel of the show at this time. But yeah, John Hicks did an interview with a New Zealand newspaper, and he was at that time, it was like he's now 55, and this was probably 15 years ago now, so he's 70 now, and he was a kid then, because they were school children. Well, they say school children, they were stage school children, you know, they were professionals. John Hicks, Gary Smith, and Freddie Wilson. And Gary Smith, I think, had played Oliver Twist on stage. I remember Freddie Foote, who played the servo robot, telling me he knew all of these guys. And as I said in an episode, Freddie said that he'd definitely played at Quarks. So we need to get to the bottom of that. I need to interview Freddie on record, which I didn't do because I was hoping to visit him. And sometimes I drop the ball with this stuff because I get very nervous ringing people up, especially if I've already spoken to them and it's not quite come off for various reasons. I then feel sick at the prospect of phoning them back, but I need to get over myself. That's why I never consider myself a proper journalist. Proper journalists have front and guile and confidence, and I don't have any of those things. Gary Smith was quite a busy young actor, but you try finding Gary Smith. You Google Gary Smith and see where it gets you. And Equity, you see, don't hold records of child actors unless they went on to have long grown-up careers. And Corona Stage School, if they were at Corona, I think they were. If not, whichever stage school they were at, none of those records exist anymore. And Freddie Wilson, I think I have found and have written to, and he's never written back. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think Richard Bignell's written to him as well. So I don't think Freddie Wilson is interested in talking about his time as a Quark. And John Hicks, as I say, gave an interview, but I know Paul... Yay, it's the Sabutio Bowl Weeble thing. John Hicks gave that interview to a New Zealand newspaper, which I still have. See if I can dig it out, actually. It's one of those bits of paper that I always find in a pile of bits of paper and go, oh, good, I'm glad I haven't lost that. But I haven't actually got a place where I keep it, so I don't actually know where it is. I'll find it when I'm looking for something else. But he gave a nice interview saying he, enjoyed being a Quark or whatever, and now he lived in New Zealand. Now, here's coming up. It's going to be my favourite bit, I think. I love the way he enters, by the way, this sort of the absolute disdain that he has for everything that's going on here. Brushes Boven past and just goes, I'm going to completely cut to the chase. He walks in, he has a look round, he sort of does a little recce, assesses the situation, doesn't give a stuff about anybody. He's really intimidating to Brian Cant. And has, he's affronted, but he has a slight amusement about these, arseholes standing up to him. That's right. I expect only one thing: superior force. Perhaps you'd care to make an appointment. That is my favourite bit of this episode. That I as I say, I love Ronald Mansell and John Cross as the two gossipy ones. Now, and I'm sure. Now, I don't think I had seen the Dominators in full until it came out on DVD. I don't think the VHS was a full edit, or if it was, I hadn't got the VHS and I'd got a bootleg. But I've got a feeling I'd seen the VHS, and I think the VHS, they'd got whatever was on the shelf. And the death scenes, I love his contempt for them. His curled lip is brilliant. But it's not just contempt, it's like amusement, but he's got authority. He's brilliant, Ronald Allen. But Tenser's death was briefer than that, and I think, is it in this episode, there's a scene where they torture Teal, which was definitely, I remember when I first watched the DVD going, oh, okay, that's much longer. And and Ballan's death at the end of this episode. Again, I was used to it just going sort of blub and him falling, whereas, as we'll see, he sort of he wanders around the spaceship getting shot and shot and shot, and it's really horrible. It is sort of one of those sort of slightly, if you care to view it in that way, slightly comical, repeat long-winded deaths. But I actually think, because I was used to it just being, a slight bit of talcum powder and him flopping to the floor, the fact that I love the way he points as well. He does an alien point. He uses 3 fingers, not 1, and again, that's just going, I'm just going to do something slightly different here. I think that's superb. And yeah, poor old Brian Cant gets killed, and we don't see them again, do we? So I mean, that's the end of our main guest star, Walter Fitzgerald, playing Senex, who, as I say, was a highly regarded leading character actor, done movies. Doesn't have a character arc or anything. Just basically comes on, and this is the bit. Yeah, this was cut from the video, and certainly whatever was on the shelf at the BBC. And I think that the NFT or the BFI, somebody had another a copy. So that material could have actually been missing if we were unlucky. And sometimes just the reinsertion of those little bits. I was definitely the same with the Faceless Ones Part 1, where the copy I had, would cut away from the little close-ups of the chameleon's hand that you see. And just the reinsertion of those tiny few seconds here and there can make a massive difference to an episode, because you couldn't show much, and you could only have certain levels of violence or horror or reveals or whatever. Those are precious moments, because they're deliberate, dramatic high points or moments within a story. And that scene where it's all, and in fact, what they cut wasn't you seeing Teal being tortured. It's Kando's reaction and begging Toba to stop, but you can hear Teal screaming, and so imagine the pain that he's in, and that was enough for it to be cut for Australia, I'm presuming. And having it back in just gives an extra edge to the episode, because I think, because we have these, slightly straightforward and guileless characters from Dulcis, you do need a bit of edge, because they're not soldiers. The Web of Fear has edge because everyone's a soldier, and the monks in Abominable Snowmen are sort of quite tough cookies, especially Cresong. But the Dulcians don't really have that edge. And in fact, the one that showed some promise was Tensor, and he sort of got killed. Yeah, so this I'm sure in the video version, he it was just a zap, and he sort of falls to the ground. Whereas that he wanders around getting blasted again and again, and it's quite a slow, protracted death. And that's poor old Balan. It's basically shooting hostages is a pretty grim thing to do dramatically, and it's not, we're going to threaten you end of episode. It's, we're going to threaten you, right? We're going to carry out the threat. He's dead. And you go, well, okay, he's a disposable character, I suppose. Although they was just having a lovely chat with Zoe and the Doctor, and now he's been blasted to smithereens a couple of times. But now and now to you, Doctor. So that's Senex and Tensor out of the way. The two of the more notable actors there aren't back next week and weren't in the first episode, so that's very curious. I think any old sausage could have played Senex. It's not often remarked upon that very well respected, but I think slightly on his way out, actor Walter Fitzgerald is one of the more anonymous high-end actor contributions to Doctor Who. But yeah, that's that cliffhanger works very effectively, except that because you've seen Rago leave the council chamber, that Rago's going to walk in and go, "Don't waste energy, Toba, you idiot," and Toby's going to go, oh, command, blooming accepted. I wish I was a functioner. So my favourite bit of that episode, anyway, is the council member saying, perhaps you'd care to make an appointment, just because I love the scene where Rago sort of storms in anyway. So maybe I can have the whole vibe of that whole scene, because he walks in, completely ignores them and goes and looks around. Then he comes back and just says what he's got to say. And he doesn't even bother to kill anybody then. It's that he has to wait for Tensor to really push it before he goes, all right, I'll kill you. But before that, because he's pushing his way around, they're going, this is simply not how we do things. Perhaps you'd care to make an appointment. But then he kills Tensor, which is great, because those deaths are rather well done and longer than I'm used to, because they cut a certain amount of the protractedness of the death scenes, so they're welcome and relatively new for me. And then he points to him using 3 fingers, because that's how bad aliens point. So yeah, I liked all of that. I thought that was all great, but especially the line, perhaps you'd care to make an appointment. That's very Doctor Who, because it's funny in a tense situation, and it's kind of arch and kind of silly, but it's also kind of real because we recognise it. It's pouring something we recognise into an alien setting, and therefore kind of helping us with the alien setting, but also making us laugh. Lovely. Well done, everybody, for that bit. What is Andrew's favourite bit?
Okay, now to pick my favourite thing from episode 4. And it's straightforward, this one. My favourite thing in episode 4 is Jamie McCrimmon. He's apart from the Doctor, but this shows in this episode that he doesn't need the Doctor to be resourceful, full of ideas. He's got plenty of agencies. He's taken charge. He's taken the fight to the Dominators, and even destroys a Quark with a cry of "Ya wee tin kettle." And there's a nice line as well that reminds us that he's from the clan McCrimmon and fought in the Jacobite rebellion. So yeah, fairly easy one here, and again, as a wee Scottish boy myself, I was very keen on Jamie as a companion back in the day, and this pairing of Jamie and Zoe with the Second Doctor is really my perfect TARDIS trio. So there it is. Yeah, Jamie McCrimmon is my favourite thing from episode 4.
Jamie is really good in this, and I've been tempted a couple of times to choose, just Jamie and the Doctor together. I think in episode 2 I wasn't I? Because they are a great pairing, and they really bounce off each other well, and you just want to be with them. I think that's the key to a great successful TARDIS team, is that you are even in a story that's not quite working, or where something's not being quite pulled off production-wise, if you're with people whose company you enjoy, who are helping you to enjoy it and are sort of enjoying themselves, but without, spoiling the reality of it, which, sounds like an oxymoron, but it sounds impossible to pull off, but it's not actually, and it's a certain kind of sort of acting chemistry that enables two apparently impossible things to be that are sort of slightly self-contradictory to coexist, and I think that does happen with Troughton and Hines. And yeah, I mean, I went straight for the "you'd care to make an appointment" because I got it in my head because I thought I just love that moment. But I could easily have chosen Jamie and Cully storming around, and I love the rock blowing up the Quark, but because I'd had the blowing up Quark last episode, I think that's why I put that out of my mind. But yeah, it's a great episode for Jamie, and I do like it when he's not sort of patronised and when he's allowed to be a little bit heroic, especially as Troughton's much better, walking around being manipulative and working things out with that sort of keen intelligence and that ticking brain. It's great that if you can have Jamie going off and having a bit of rough and tumble, So I think that's a brilliant choice. Quite right. And I love Jamie. He's so good, and Fraser Hines is so good. I concur with Andrew's choice, even though my choice was a different thing. So we have one more episode to go. There should have been 2 episodes, but Derek Sherwin has issued an edict to say, no, let's chop this down and cut to the chase. So we will get to one of the few climactic episode 5s that Doctor Who has. The first of them. This is the first Doctor Who 5-parter. But we've got all that to enjoy in the next episode of Happy Times and Places, the last episode of the Dominators, with Andrew Smith taking us full circle. And thanks very much for listening. And if you want to come along and enjoy the next episode, well, perhaps you'd care to make an appointment. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's time for the 5th, originally not planned to be final episode of The Dominators, but it is. It was originally planned as a 6-parter, and it got edited down to 5. Particularly the last 2 episodes were sort of amalgamated into one part, I think, pretty much. It was a bit more complicated than that. But anyway, let's look at the whys and wherefores. Maybe we won't. Maybe I will just react to what I see. Rather sadly, as I've been doing the Dominators, or as the Dominators have been, we've actually lost 2 key members of the team. So Henry Lincoln, as I record this, not only a month or so ago, the last 60s writer remaining died. And now, in between episodes 4 and 5 of this, Kenneth Ives, who in the previous episodes you'll have noticed I talk about in the present tense, has passed away, sadly. So, we've lost another member of the Doctor Who family has gone to the great TARDIS in the sky, and a shame because he's done a good job in this. Sorry, Kenneth. Sorry to see you go. It was Hawkeye and Last of the Mohicans with John Abernethy and Philip Maddock, directed by David Maloney. Prentice Hancock's in it. Not like the Daniel Day-Lewis film, but BBC, much of it in the studio version, and with much to recommend it, actually. Although, you would not make Last of the Mohicans with Chingachgook and Magua played by John Abernethy and Philip Maddock, or comparable actors in this day and age. And it is a bit odd watching that the aspect of it now, even though they're both absolutely terrific actors. Anyway, that's for another time. We are going to make peace, even though they won't like it, with the Dominators as we choose episode 5. We're going to watch from the beginning in 3, 2, 1. This better be an exciting episode, because I could have said a lot of that over the action over the course of the next 23 minutes or so. Because as I recall, well, yes, this is why Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln, who'd done such good work on The Abominable Snowmen and The Web of Fear, fell out with the Doctor Who production team. I remember I was too young to understand, and there was a Doctor Who winter special, summer special magazine that interviewed all of the producers, which was the last thing I wanted. I mean, now, what an amazing thing to have done. Alexa, Volume 4. And Derek Sherwin said, we lost an episode of The Dominators, and I immediately thought that meant, they lost an episode, as in lost episodes, which means they must have subsequently found it, because they've got all of the... He didn't mean we lost an episode of The Dominators in the sense that it became a missing episode. He meant in the course of the production, we lost an episode, i.e. we decided to knock it back from 6 to 5. It wasn't just that, because I've seen some of the paperwork. It was also, there were arguments about merchandising and things like that. The Quarks were set to be the rivals to the Daleks, and I think Sherwin had got his eye on some golden opportunities for the BBC, and Haseman and Lincoln had their eye on, a similar to deal to that which Terry Nation had benefited from. As it was moot because the Quarks were never going to quite take off in such a way. But it certainly looks like Sherwin could have handled it better. And anyway, it means Norman Ashby, the name, I think, of the fathers-in-law, an amalgam of the name of the fathers-in-law of Haseman and Lincoln. Johnson Bailey is not in studio this week, so yes, I think is it John Tucker is the body extra, although you can't really see it, and obviously we see him on Johnson Bailey on film from last week getting killed because the reprise from last week is played in from film. And it one does get the feeling. I mean, I'm sympathetic to Derek Sherwin in the sense that that was another episode ending where Toba is being unnecessarily sadistic and wasteful, and the way that our heroes escape from the terror they are facing is for Rako to walk in and go, "Stop wasting the batteries, you moron," and Toba to go, "Oh, bloomin' heck." So, I mean, I can't imagine that a sixth episode of The Dominators, unlike Abominable Snowmen, which really kicks off in episode 5, although the Web of Fear episode 5 is a bit tready watery. I think the Great Intelligence says, I'll give you 20 minutes. And actually the episode takes 25, so if it's 20 minutes, it's 25 minutes. But it's still great. I love the Web of Fear. I will hear no word against it. I think it's a magnificent story, and I think their stories are sort of gutsy and action-packed. And this isn't quite the same. I don't know if it's because of the look of the thing. It's easy to be sort of tough and gritty when you've got soldiers running about. That's why I'm always surprised at how tough and gritty Abominable Snowmen is towards the end, because I don't expect that so much from monks. I don't know why. But I certainly don't expect it from a balding man in a curtain, much as I love Arthur Cox. But I think all the Quarry stuff really works. But I've got to look for two things, of course. And I mean, this is a nuclear shelter, isn't it? That they're in, and that I like it when the theme of the story provides a setting or a plot point. So this is about pacifism as a result of nuclear war, which is something in the air very much in the late 1960s. So again, it's odd that they set it in such a sort of far away, unidentifiable place. I suppose because they want to create a new society for us to watch and consider the morals of the piece through the lens of these, this pacifist society, which you couldn't do if you set it on Earth, certainly not contemporary Earth. So you can see why they do that, but it does mean that we're sort of a step away from the Dulcians, and we're slightly askance at their sort of rather fey hopelessness. But that said, this is a story looking at the peace movement in the 60s and doing an unusual thing for Doctor Who. Instead of being awash with sort of liberal subtext as Doctor Who so often is, this, and I think it's really interesting in that regard, and I think it's a legitimate use of Doctor Who to put a different point of view. And much as I was very angry with the story for doing this back in the day, I think its greatest crimes are not actually the rather reactionary attitudes of the writers, which nonetheless do have a practical thing that liberals like me have to wrestle with and go, well, actually, pacifism is all well and good, but what do you do if to an aggressor then? And I that's a really legitimate thing to raise within Doctor Who. But what I like about the fact that they have the nuclear bunker is that aspect of the storytelling and the plot and the practicality of the unraveling of the story is that they're hiding in a location that is linked to the nuclear aspect of the story, and I like that. It's not just a random place that they found to hide out in. It's a nuclear shelter, which takes us back to the beginning of the story, where the Dominators are coming and soaking up the nuclear energy, and Balin and his lot are learning about the dangers of nuclear fallout, and Cully and his lot are on a dangerous escapade to the island that's full of death because of the nuclear fallout. So it's all, I like all of that. Look at Ronald Allen, that sort of detached, grotesque alienness is great. Everyone's suitably mucky, which I like. Do you think Kando and Teal are going to get married? They held hands there. I like that. And it's a bit clunky, that dialogue where they go, "Oh dear, Balin has died. What a shame." But so often in Doctor Who, and I picked up the seeds of death for doing this. If somebody dies and somebody else doesn't see, nobody's really that bothered, and they don't even acknowledge it. But it's quite nice that they at least emphasise that one of their number has been brutally murdered, even if they did deal with it in a hey kids, we didn't manage to save that old man from getting repeatedly shot to bits by malevolent boxes. What rotten luck, everybody. I seem to recall Wendy Padbury saying this dress that she wore was so flimsy and almost made of paper that it sort of tore loads and loads of times. I remember. Did I tell you in an earlier episode? Sorry, there's been a bit of a gap between me doing the earlier instalments of this. One of the first things I heard Wendy Padbury say was not a very complimentary thing about Maurice Barry. And yeah, this all ties in with the whole, so they're after getting the energy, and they're going to do, it's the sort of same trick as the Dalek invasion of Earth, isn't it? They're going to drop a bomb, and our guys are going to intercept it. And it's curious, isn't it? Because we end this one on a cliffhanger. This is the beginning of the season. And actually, it's funny how this season unfolds, because you have this leading into the mind robber via the cliffhanger of the volcano, and then the mind robber ends really weirdly and abruptly with the TARDIS just sort of reassembling. But we find out next week that as a result of what's happened, it's gone invisible, and that starts the invasion. So we have a sort of run through the first three stories of all being very connected, but ending quite oddly. Lovely that Jamie, who has been dismissed, this happens to, it's a great thing that they do with Jamie. They dismiss him. He comes up with a brilliant idea, and then he goes, "Oh, it's probably a rubbish idea." I love that. That's a glorious Jamie bit of business, and and I have to say that there aren't many things I like more than Fraser Hines going, eh? He's Fraser is never far away from for a gag or a pun. He's a man of real patter, And he manages to put that into Jamie, and yet I always believe him as Jamie, even though I think there's a bit of cognitive dissonance. Is that in that you, I don't know, do I kind of know it's Fraser Hines rather than what a Jacobite from the Battle of Culloden would really be like, because there's a certain point fairly early on. Rob Shearman identifies it in when we're doing. Oh, look at that! That's quite funky. When we're doing Running Through Corridors, the burning torch in the wall. Love that. Beautiful lighting there, and cutting onto film to have the sort of the cutting. It's an ordinary screwdriver that burns a hole in the wall. So the start of the sonic screwdriver being able to do everything. I don't know if that is the sonic screwdriver, is it? I was talking. But he said it looks like an ordinary screwdriver, didn't he? Anyway, too late. You know. Oh, they burnt through that pretty quickly. That Jamie sort of stops being Jamie and becomes a sort of amalgam of Jamie and Fraser Hines, and I think the show is all the better for it. And you can rationalise it because you go, well, you know, how long has Jamie been travelling with the Doctor? He's learnt, you know, he's learnt the banter and the patter, and he's picked up the things that he's seen, and yes, he is, you know, instinctively reactive and sometimes intuitive, and he improvises and he comes up with solutions, but he's also a bit thick, and I quite like that. And I love the fact that Troughton enjoys chucking things around and causing explosions. The sort of glee that he has. He's a little miscreant. Is Troughton. Top marks as well to the fact that we've cut straight from the action in the bunker. We don't see Jamie and Cully going out and having a preamble. We cut straight to them charging down a hill, behind some quarks. They're straight into the action. No need for, the sort of segueing from, one scene to the other. But yes, Troughton is like a sort of oik at school, isn't he? who takes great delight in sort of chaos and destruction, and that's very, very charming. Troughton does it very well. I'm loving all these. Oh, poor old Quark is gonna blow up. Love that. It's not quite blown up. This is terrific stuff. This is the sort of stuff that if I was a kid in the late 1960s watching Doctor Who, I would have lapped up all of this. Although looking at that, the continuity between, because that was a shot of 3 quarks and then it was just one blowing up. I'd never noticed that before. But anyway, if I'd been a kid in the 60s, this stuff of, having a little test tube that's something you can sort of imitate at school, and hurling it around, blowing up the robots. You see, Toba, you've been told so many times not to waste energy. You're finally obeying orders, and actually, that's the great irony of this. Is that's the worst thing he could possibly do at this point. You finally learn that the moral of the story is here: if your leader encourages you not to be sadistic and not to enjoy killing your enemies, when you finally, that's a brilliant shot, and that's a wonderful natural set, that those peaked. Whether it's rocks or sandbanks or whatever, it's really unusual. It's not quite like a normal quarry. Those peaks, they're glorious, and I think the story really benefits from all of this location stuff. But yeah, if you finally turn your back on sadism, all your plans are going to go to hell, and actually you should have done all that killing and wastefulness. Because as soon as you stop, your plan will fail. So Kenneth Ives was, a definitive director of Pinter on television. Harold Pinter, who wasn't in the Abominable Snowmen's work. Now, I like this. I like the thought that's gone into the idea. I mean, the idea of robots only having a certain amount of power. It gives them a weakness, and you go, oh, do we need that? And you go, well, actually, it gives them a plausibility. So, yeah, why not? And then the idea that one of those has got slightly more power than the other one. So they do that funny thing where they go, and they equalize, and they do it with it's explained within the script with great efficiency. They just say, don't they, equalize. And so as a result, the one that's got the most power gives a bit of his power. It's a bit like plugging your laptop into your iPhone into your laptop. They've attacked the drilling quarks. Oh dear, that's really sad. There's poor quark underneath the drill. Oh, and poor Topus batting his hands, dusting his hands. He's finally lost it with Ra, going, oh, see, you keep telling me not to do anything. But yeah, the equalize thing I really like. That's because that puts some thought into how these things operate, and that's a very sort of practical thing. And I can get how that works. And clever use of the quarks here as well, because there's only 3 quark actors. Well, actually, I've been looking at the paperwork. They've only got the location stuff, so it's definitely John Hicks, Gary Smith, and Freddie Wilson on location. But Freddie Foote, who played the servo robot in The Wheel in Space, told me that he was a quark. Now, there is no paperwork for the studio stuff. So maybe one week, John Hicks, Gary Smith, or Freddie Wilson was ill, and they went, who's short and can do a robot? Oh, what about the lad who did the servo robot? There's no reason why he couldn't have done, because we don't have the paperwork. And paperwork can be wrong as well. And Freddie remembers being a quark, so who am I to argue? But who knows? Who knows? That's a very big hole he's made with his not a screwdriver welding thing. And that are they digging with their hands? But it doesn't matter, does it? And actually, you get a real sense just by the use of the ladder, and maybe it's something to do with the lighting as well. I do feel that they're underground here. And I don't know how you suggest that. It's very clever. This definitely feels like a nuclear bunker, a bunker with a bunk bed. And I think, yeah, the lighting in here is very nice. But yeah, there is a real sense of place. The periscope helps as well. Yeah. So they gotta go and catch the bomb. Yes, he's got a sort of grimace as Ronald Allen. He's like a sort of corpse of stone. Uncle Quentin. So Troughton was getting a bit cross with the role at this point. I know that Paddy Russell said that she'd spoken to him many years later and said, Patrick, I've always liked working with you, but I spoke to a few people who worked with you when you were on Doctor Who, and they said you were hard work, and he said I was just knackered, and that's why he's not on location here. That's why the Mind Robber episodes are only very short, 19-20 minutes, I think, or 20-21 minutes. But of course, episode 1, because it replaces episode 6 of this, has to be cheap, and so only really has the 3 regulars in it. So they go, yeah, these episodes are really short, and then Troughton goes, yeah, but it's all us. Come on. So I know they really, I think he was really exhausted, and was not happy this year, but he never stops acting his socks off. I mean, how can you take your eyes off that face? But it means we can have fun with. I would be very interested to see because the film is slightly out of phase, so I don't think it's as blatant a shot of his face as sometimes legend has it. But let's have a look. It is, as I say, an interesting curio that here he is. So this is not Patrick Troughton. This is an out of phase Chris Jeffries. Now, and of course, because the film would not have been out of phase in the original broadcast for the uninitiated, and forgive me if I make a hash of this, I am reporting what I'm told by my friend Peter, who explains to me how these technical things work. Something happens when we copy stuff over to the to preserve and sell these Doctor Who's. Something happened in the process of making the recordings is that some of the stuff that is on film, if we don't have the original film, when it's transferred over to videotape and back again or something like that, it goes out of phase, which means you get that slightly shaky image, which means it's not as distinct. And there's no rules, apparently, as to why some film sequences are in phase and some are out. And that particular film sequence is out of phase. So we don't quite get as good a look at the Doctor's face, even though it's there on camera. So, that's interesting that they didn't even sort of try. The camera shakes a little bit, certainly as he gets close, it shakes and it lowers. So there's a vague effort to disguise the fact it's not Doctor Who, but not much of one. And there we have it. So the Doctor's put the bomb on the Dominator ship, and Rago's last word is obey, which is what we've been telling Toba to do for the whole thing. And then it ends rather quickly, doesn't it? Because, it's not fun. So that shot of the Doctor running across the planet, that's really not very far from the end. I'd sort of anticipated a little bit more action, but there's not at all. They basically they catch the bomb, chuck it into the spaceship, and boom. So there we are. That's the end of the Dominators. I can't imagine what an extra episode would have done. I think it's, even though that ending is quite sudden, and there's none of your usual sort of set of goodbyes or an apposite coda to reflect on what we have just seen. It's there's a volcano, let's go. But as I say, that's part and parcel of this very odd start to season 6 anyway, which has run in pretty directly from a repeat of Evil of the Daleks that was broadcast after season 5, so it's quite relentless. It is. It's almost like the series is too afraid to sort of slow down, and is sort of moving. It's getting through it by the skin of its teeth. So that's interesting, but it's a very funny sort of wayward season. The fact that you can go from the mind rubber to the invasion, which is totally different in tone and style, equally good and interesting and well mounted, but totally different. And then to the Crotons, which I really like, but it is like sort of slightly cheap and cliched sci-fi in many many respects. So really interesting. Sort of, as I say, yes, slightly wayward season. But I liked the Dominators there. I'm not blind to its fault, but I actually enjoyed it much more than I thought. I didn't think it was as dull as I perhaps had it down as. I think that's because I quite enjoy wrestling with what it's trying to say. I certainly think Ronald Allen and Kenneth Ives are great. The Quarks, I think, look good. The cute voices, do they work? I don't know. I'm in two minds. But I admire what they were trying to do with that. I can see what they're trying to do there. Instead of giving something a scary voice, give it something different to be a bit more surprising. In fact, one of my beefs with the new series, is that they've taken the Zygons and the Ice Warriors, and I think now, but I've only seen a trailer, the Sea Devils, so each creatures with very distinctive voices, and they've gone, what we'll do to update those is to give them slightly sort of generic monstery voices, and really, is that what you've decided to do? But because that's less risky. And I think it was a risky move to do all the sound stuff that they did with the Quarks. But I like it, especially that all the trilling and all the sound effects that emit from the Quarks are samples of Sheila Grant's voice. So, I think that's laudable in intent. If I'm not 100% sure of the execution. I think my favourite bit from episode 5, when it's a toss-up between Jamie being dismissed, then having a great idea, and then dismissing it himself. I really like that. Or Troughton's glee at the explosion. Because my overall thing, I'm going to do it in the wrong order now, my overall thing, which I think is hands down the best thing about the story, is Ronald Allen as Rago. I think he's brilliant. I think he looms over the thing cadaverously, and he's got a better part than Kenneth Ives. I don't think Kenneth Ives does anything wrong, but Tober is there to be, slightly annoying. He annoys Rago, and slightly sort of stupid. He does the hot-headed stuff that his commander has to rein in, and those characters are, I think, less easy to make menacing than the leering commander type figure. So it's no disrespect to Kenneth Ives, and as for the Dulcians, they all do their best, but they're not, they're not dealing with the best dialogue, and they're not brilliantly drawn. So nobody does anything wrong, but nobody's going to get singled out as doing super work, because there's not an awful lot to deal with there. But I think Ronald Allen emerges with great dignity. He definitely has an alien thing going on, and I think his performance probably led Ian Marter to that sort of creaking, death-like, visceral depiction that he gives them on the page. I think the springboard for that was obviously something he saw in Ronald Allen's performance, which has that risen from the grave kind of his cruelty is a grim cruelty. He's not a smiling sadist. It's more a sort of morbid fascination that doesn't particularly turn him on, and yet it does, but only in a way that you're turned on when you're kind of almost undead. It's really good stuff from Ronald Allen. So he's my favourite thing, my bonus thing. Do I go for... I feel like I should give Fraser Hines some credit, because I so often overlook the regulars. And that's essence of Jamie, that him being ignored, coming up with a good idea, what I explained before. But I did like Troughton's glee at the explosion. I think I'm going to go for Troughton's glee at the havoc he is going to cause. That childlike revelling in chaos that is massively irresponsible in a hero in many ways, and yet is the key to the Doctor's success. And it's a really careful balancing act, that. And I think that, the Troughton Doctor gets it right. So Troughton's glee at the explosions is my thing for episode 5, and Ronald Allen is as Rago is my thing for the whole thing. Dominators 5, favourite thing and bonus he's done.
Okay, so here's my favourite thing from episode 5, and it's the business with Jamie tripping up the Quark with his homemade rope. It's a bit of silliness, really, but it's also practical. It maybe gets a little more silly when the Quark stands in Jamie's hand and the Doctor needs to call it forward. But, it's practical, it's resourceful, and it works well enough. It's got a believable ploy with the Quarks, who obviously have a vulnerability that if you knock them over, they can't get back up again. Like turtles, just lie there with their little legs flailing around. So, yeah, that was my favourite thing in episode 5. And my bonus favourite thing for the whole serial is Ronald Allen as Rago, who I keep wanting to call Ragu. He just really invests himself in the character. He plays it straight, seriously. He's constantly, his mouth turned down, he's got a sneering at his probationer, clearly wanting to kill him if he gives him the least opportunity or the least excuse. And he even made me forget that he was the manager of the Crossroads Motel on ITV, which I'm sure, Toby, you must have told listeners about. Ronald Allen appeared in the Crossroads soap opera for a long, long time. And he managed to make me look past that. So my bonus favourite is Ronald Allen as Rago. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed the serial, Toby, and it's not been too much of a struggle for you. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, because I certainly enjoyed the excuse to look at it again. And nice bit of research for a current Big Finish thing as well. Okay, Toby, see you soon, mate. And great podcast. Enjoy. Bye.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. That's Andrew Smith, writer of Full Circle, very kindly doing this podcast. And the cherry on the top of the cake of having Andrew, who's a lovely man and a very, very good writer, is that his bonus thing he chose. I mean, I was never going to win, but we ended chiming together of choosing our final thing was Ronald Allen. I don't know if I did mention that he was in Crossroads. I sort of take that for granted, except, of course, I've got to remember that some things that I take for granted are not necessarily universally known, not because I have special knowledge, but because there are lots of people who listen to this who are younger than I am, so don't have the same spheres of reference, or who aren't quite as all over the actor's side of things as I am. But with Ronald Allen, I mean, I knew him from Crossroads. So then, when I started reading about Doctor Who and in Doctor Who: A Celebration, they said that which was my education in Doctor Who, that Peter Haining book. It said that the Dominators were played by Crossroads, Ronald Allen and Kenneth Ives, because then it tied it in with the following story, the Mind Robber, which was written by the creator of one of the creators of Crossroads, Peter Ling, and Ronald Allen was very well known, even though we didn't really watch Crossroads. We knew it was there and it was on. And Ronald Allen was David Hunter in Crossroads, and he played that part for a very long time. And I'm sure I did mention in one of the earlier episodes, maybe episode 1, that I remember when Ronald Allen died, my mum said, the radio obituary seemed to suggest that he was actually not a great actor. And I remember being appalled that it would do that, especially as I'd already been impressed with Ronald Allen because he'd sent up his image by playing Uncle Quentin in the Comic Strip Presents Famous Five spoofs. So he obviously had a sense of humour about himself. And then I'm delighted to see him in Doctor Who, One as this, and yes, that downturned mouth. I love the way that Andrew put that. That sort of grim and grotesque turn, but absolutely straight and absolutely poised, as Rago. And then he comes back in the Ambassadors of Death, and it's a totally different performance and a beautifully underplayed. I love him in the Ambassadors of Death, which has some showy performances too. It's full of good performances, but I really like Ronald Allen's sort of purred, underplayed, pragmatic professionalism that he invests Ralph Cornish with. And I believe he had so much fun on the Ambassadors of Death that I think he came to visit them on the set of Inferno because he'd enjoyed being part of the Doctor Who family. So yeah, kudos to Ronald Allen, who, in most history books that decide to include him will be, the guy from Crossroads. But I mean, he's in A Night to Remember, that wonderful Titanic film. It's easy to dismiss an actor because they become associated with one part or a program that is, deemed to be the one that we, cock a snoop at or whatever. But I think Ronald Allen is a perfect example of the fact that really good actors can give us different things and surprise us, and we should never take them for granted. You should never take an actor for granted just because of one performance that you know them from. And I love seeing people in different things being different. And, I like industry. I like people who bring more to the table than they need to. I hate a lazy performance. And I have to say that most people who come into Doctor Who seize the opportunity to not give a lazy performance because they're giving a performance they'll never get to give in anything else. Which is also why I like his performance in Ambassadors of Death, because that is actually a sort of, authority figure behind a desk kind of performance, and he invests a lot into it, even though he makes it look very easy. It's quite a low key performance. But anyway, I'll talk about that when I get to Ambassadors of Death, because I've been talking for a very long time. But I fear I might have repeated myself a little bit during episode 5 because I did have a little bit of a gap between episodes 4 and 5, but partly because I think Kenneth Ives might have died on the night that I recorded episode 4. So let's salute both of the Dominators, Ronald Allen, long dead, Kenneth Ives, more recently, but they are the title characters of that story, and I salute the work of them both, and both, more than a sum of the parts of their careers that I've talked about during this. Andrew Smith continues to write for Big Finish. He's also running marathons and all sorts of things and looking very, very svelte at the moment, even though he's older than me. Shames me. But check out his work if you can, and if you ever get the chance to meet him, what an affable, cheerful bloke he is. I'm very... I watched Full Circle when I was a little boy, and the idea that I would be mates with the guy that wrote it, even though he actually wasn't that much age difference between us, but he was 18 and I was like, what was I when Full Circle was on? 7 or 8. So maybe he's about 10 years. Is he 10 years older than me? Yeah, maybe he is. But that's a bigger gap when you're 8 and 18 than it is when you're 48 and 50. Is he? I don't know. I'm not giving away Andrew's age, but anyway, the point is, I feel very blessed that I can call upon an actual writer from Doctor Who to invoke one of the less celebrated stories of Doctor Who. I was not looking forward to doing this one because I've never been a great fan of the Dominators. I still don't think it's the best Doctor Who story ever, but there's a lot more to it than I'd thought. I think it wrestles with some interesting ideas. It does something that a lot of Doctor Who stories don't do. It comes from a perspective that most Doctor Who stories aren't written from. I'm absolutely happy for it to raise those questions. It has some actors giving above and beyond the call of duty. It's got some really, good stuff going on location. And come on, it's a story about Tweety robot boxes commanded by squabbling alien tortoises who decide to show their might to a planet of pacifists by stomping about and killing Brian Cant. And I don't think there's any other program in the history of the universe that could sustain that synopsis. So for that, you can dominate me any time, and I will submit. So until next time, join me next time for Happy Times and Places. That's a command, and I want you to accept it. Thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Andrew Smith, who can be found on Twitter at Andrew Smith, but with a capital A, a capital S, and a number 3 instead of the letter E. I'm grateful to Andrew and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Tom White, Stephen White, Sydney Wilson, Andrew Willis, Rhys Williams, Michael Williams, Rich Wiggins, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, Sabrina Terabassi, Damien Timmer, Nick Temple, Neil Tate, Stephen, all small case, no surname, that's all I know, Stephen, Tim Smith, David Shepherdson, Graham Slate, Keith Say, Jim Sangster, Mark Sandham, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Scott Pride, Kevin Parker, Jonathan Potter, Melvin Pena, Dave Owen, Graham Knott, Matthew Newton, Christopher Newman, Ian Morgan, and Nathan Moore. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Can I just stop talking about Doctor Who for a second to tell you about the new home delivery food system called Middle Class Ease? This is where somebody who's asking you for money for a podcast also gets money from a home delivery service at a time of great fun. That's the sort of thing you're not having on this podcast because I don't do adverts. I mean, I do adverts in my everyday life. I'm currently doing a voiceover for a conservatory, which is part of my artistic output, he says. But what I don't do is I don't put adverts on my podcasts. I think they should be free at the point of contact, partially because I don't like having to scroll through adverts on other people's podcasts, partially because I don't like because you can tell that they're false. I just happen to really like this thing, which the algorithm has chosen to be the advert on my thing. I'm slightly indifferent about this product, but I'm having to advertise it on my thing, and because you have to do it yourself. It means that you're not an actor hired to do a job, which is what you are in the real world. It means you're actually going, yeah, no, I genuinely like this, I promise. And isn't that a marvellous coincidence that I'm full of beans about this product that's chosen to advertise on my podcast? So, I don't want to do that. I think it sounds naff, and and I think it breaks up the flow. And anyway, it's just, yeah. I would rather take your money off you directly. That's what it is. Cut out the middleman. Cut out the subscription to a magazine or the lifestyle website or the manly razor blades or whatever. Just come to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, and for £3 a month, that's the minimum. You get advance releases. You get bonus material. You get pictures of my dog, you get monthly AMAs, you get access, you get all sorts of other stuff. The tiers go up, the trinkets aren't all that, to be honest. This is why I don't do advertising. It's a sort of pay as you can afford to or want to model, which is again my preferred way of doing things. And I'm very grateful to those people who have really kindly supported these, and I think we have a nice time over there. It's lots of fun, and I'm often getting chipped in with extra observations about the podcasts, or sometimes corrections, and it's all good fun and a nice bunch of people. So if you want to join that nice bunch of people, I mentioned some of their names there. That's another one of the bonuses that you get. Patreon.com/Toby Haydock. Men, are you skinny? So yeah, that's to enable me to make what sounds like a principled stand of not allowing advertising, but really it's more just a kind of feeling that I'd rather not. it's no more than that. But why not? Why don't I disguise it as morality? Because that's got the currency for that is much higher. But, if you've got better things to spend your money on, and I'm sure you have, we're in a time of financial crisis, and I totally get it. What costs you nothing is to go to iTunes and to leave these a 5-star review. We live in a a world of extremes, so nothing less than 5 will do in order to get the algorithms tweaked to perfection so that passing punters can become aware of these podcasts in that vast cyber jungle out there, which is full of the caws and cries of other Doctor Who podcasters, and there's some damn good ones out there, so I need all the help I can get. So a 5-star review, a few lines saying what you like about this, and enticing people to sample these podcasts, Toby Hadoke's Time Travels, would be really, really helpful. And another way of supporting these is to go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can just leave a tip. You don't get any exclusives or bonuses or advanced material, but it's a way of occasionally buying me a metaphorical cup of coffee, which, is I feel very cap in hand doing all of this, but it's part of the financial model of a creative's existence, and I'm very grateful for all the support so far. Somewhat flabbergasted, actually, but it's the way that we do things these days, and what the creative gods take away in repeat fees and basic decency within the industry, they give back with a certain level of autonomy for those who are desperate enough to keep generating their own material and throwing it into the void. Hello! The void, of course, includes Twitter and Facebook that I am on, at Toby Hadoke on Twitter. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. I have an Instagram as well, at toby.hadoke. I'm trying to get better at doing videos on that, so it's all marvellous over there. And the Facebook page is not my personal page, which I'm scaling down. It's the Toby Hadoke page, which has all my professional comedic creative output on. God, I feel like such a hustler is the wrong word. I think probably whore is better. I feel like a whore, he said on a grotty Wednesday morning, feeling like a whore. Anyway, but I'm your whore. Let me be your whore. Let me stop now saying that I'm your whore. I'm unnerved. Well, I suppose for the postscript, I should just add a couple of the comments from patron Phil, from Fraser Gregory, who is a guest on another Happy Times and Places, but who is perhaps the Dominator's greatest fan. And for episode 4, Fraser points out that my favourite thing about this episode is the argument between Rago and Toba. Having the two antagonists antagonise each other throughout the story is a great twist. It makes you wonder how they can dominate any galaxies when they can't even control themselves. Quite right. However, this scene stands out more, as I've been led to believe by someone on Twitter, so pinch your salt applied, but still, that this scene was the first contribution to Doctor Who by this story's assistant script editor, Mr. Terence Dix. As first contributions go, it's a great one. Utter padding, but top drawer padding, adding depth to characters who could have very easily been 2D and bringing them to life in a very tense way. Superb. I don't know if that's true or not, Gregory Fraser. Well, I'm not suddenly just referring to people by surnames, even though his surname is a first name. I've got a few of those. I'm just noticing a comment by Nathan Martin, another double surname, first name person. But listen, and I suppose Guy Lambert, there are Lamberts, aren't there? So I have a lot of patrons who are people with first names which are also surnames which are also first names. I'm hoping that Christopher Benjamin joins me soon. Colin Douglas too. There's a bit in Nicholas Craig, an actor, Nigel Planer's thing. It's a little handbook for being an actor, and he does a thing about actors with surnames who are first names, and it's nice because there's loads of Doctor Who actors on there, and it just made me feel that they were being recognised, even though it's just a silly thing about actors with surnames that can also be first names. But that's actually quite an actor's thing, because a lot of actors, especially in the 60s, if they're called something like this, is why I think I've had trouble finding Gerald Curtis from the Daleks, because I suspect he was probably called Gerald Curtis something, so very hard to find on censuses and things like that, because a lot of actors would drop their surname and use their middle name as their surname, sometimes because there was already an actor with their surname in equity, and sometimes because it was just a thing to do, to act under, because it's still some quarters it's deemed shameful to be a member of the second oldest profession, and sometimes it's just, I think people quite fancied it, and it's not always, people don't always either. I remember Norman Hartley, who was in The Invasion and The Time Meddler, was actually called Norman Schnazell, something like that, which is a great name, but his agent said, no, but dial it down a little, whereas of course now you do it the other way around. So sometimes an actor who has quite an innocuous name might be called something like Greatorex Magoo, and they've called themselves, John James or whatever. Anyway, look, that was a segue. I do have another comment from Fraser. Where's my other comment from Fraser? Because he had plenty to say about the Dominators, because he's the Dominator guy. Here we go. And this is clearing up, I think, some of my... Because I don't research Happy Times and Places. I just sit and watch it. So the bust-up between Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln and the production team, I can't remember what I said in the actual main body of the commentary. It was ages ago, and I haven't listened back to it. I've just stuck all the episodes together. That's not quite true. I do trim some of the episode endings just to make it smarter, and because I actually like there being little differences between the omnibus and the episodes. I don't know why. Part of my brain would want them to be exactly the same, so you don't lose any footage, because it's a precious archival treasure. And the other half of me goes, well, if people have bothered to listen to both versions, they should get something different. So I'm still not sure I approve of either policy, but anyway, it's what you got. So Fraser says, I believe Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln were just as put out, if not more, by Peter Bryant and the BBC's attempts to merchandise the Quarks as they were with anything Derek Sherwin did with their script. At least that's the impression I've always got from the interviews I've read, which is possibly very true. I think there definitely was an element of that. I think, Bryant had his eye on going, well, we don't want the same thing to happen as happened with the Daleks, and Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln going, we want exactly the same thing to happen as happened with the Daleks, although the Quarks dominating the merchandise market was always, I think, a bit of a stretch. Anyway, so there we go. That was the Dominators. You've had over 3 hours, 15 minutes of entertainment, and some of it was new, and some of it was gone from the, as I say, I think with this one I only clipped the ending to episode 3 because I forgot with the first 2, so they might have slightly wayward exits, as it were, and some of the earlier omnibuses I did, I snipped the beginnings as well, just to cut out a bit of the flannel, but this one is full of flannel. I think as the Dominators was butchered from 6 episodes down to 5, you should have as full an experience as you can with the Dominators' Happy Times and Places. So it's actually the length of a 6-parter, because I've kept in all the waffle. And then, you see, it could be living proof of why the Dominators needed the treatment it got, or something like that. I think I should be quiet now. My own command accepted.